love you with all of our hearts. You've placed us here on this land, in this country, at this time, so that we can stand and do what you would have us do to protect, to gird up, to ensure that the United States of America is your land. We love America, and we love you. And we thank you for bringing us together on one accord for you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen.
All right. Well, now we have another amazing singer who's going to share their talent with us and sing the national anthem. Marianne. Marianne, here she is.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed, and the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, as the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave? Oh, the land of the free and the home of the brave.
There's so much talent in this room. So I want to acknowledge the volunteers that make this event, an event like this, happen. People who make it more formally volunteers. In other words, they made application by going to conventionofstates.com and pick the Take Action tab, and there's just so many different things that you can volunteer for, and it's really a lot of fun. There are a lot of people in this room that I'd like you to stand up, whether you have been a volunteer and come to the Church of the Mall before or done other things in the past. Please stand up so we can acknowledge, whether we have Tom here with videoing, Pete also videoing, we have Frank also doing that, and everybody stand up who's been a volunteer, please, and let's give them a big round of applause. As a regional grassroots person, we're just so glad to have our volunteers, because that's really what makes this organization, is that we're all in this as a team. It really is a family. I've heard Mark say that many times, and I feel that way with everybody here, that we really are. So thank you all for all your service. We have a couple announcements, and we're going to give the mic to the people who are going to make these announcements. But first of all, I want to invite you all to Church on the Mall, the first Wednesday of every month, and the next one is July 6th. So what do? We all meet together, we support each other, we learn. It's an educational process. We show PowerPoints, we show videos, and now we're going to add singing to that. We do prayer, we also do veterans, and it's really just it's a wonderful time, 6:30 to 8, to come and to bring people, because we the people, we're the only people who can take our country back. It's the only way, and Convention of States is the way. As you all know, there's just no other route but to use the Constitution to save the Constitution. So I invite you all to come to that. We have a couple things I'll announce, and then I'll invite other people up. On June 14th, we just met Mary Ann, and her husband Bob is sitting next to her, to show you how much we could expand in this 8 months. They started their own group in Downingtown. So for people who are in the Westchester Downingtown area, they can go to that group, and there they are. Raise your hand so that you can meet with them, talk to them about it, and they meet at the Veterans Centers down there. So thank you so much for that. On next Saturday, June 18th, Gary, raise your hand, a 5K event, Wounded Warriors, and it acknowledges and it's about the soldiers who lost their lives in Afghanistan. So I want to say something about that.
This coming Saturday, June 18th, it's the Wounded Hero 5K.
Closer.
It's the Wounded Hero 5K. It's their 10th annual, 10th year for them doing it. This year is going to be very special. We're doing a memorial for the 13 Marines and soldiers that died in Afghanistan on the way out. I believe half of the families will actually be represented. So it should be a very emotional ceremony, as well as the 5K. You don't have to run. You can come and walk. Just come and enjoy the event. There'll also be a car show from 9 to 3. Come on out and support Convention of States. Is going to have a table there as well. If anybody wants to volunteer for that, we'll gladly have you for that as well.
Thank you so much. The day before that, Kurt, who's part of the grassroots team, has told me very recently, the last day, that we'll be doing what's called Third Fridays in Souderton. And we'll have tables there, and it's kind of like a fair. We'll have a table and others as well. So that's June 17th. We also will be at the Eagle Arms on the, looks like the 5th of August, and October 28th and December 16th, and a lot of other things. So we do a lot of volunteering. We get petitions signed, and in fact, if you have not signed a petition, we have them out there. And Becca is going to send around the clipboards so that you can sign up to be a volunteer. You have those going around? Yes. So Becca has that as well, and she'll tell you more about writing letters to your legislator when she comes up and speaks in just a minute. So those are basically the announcements. You'll hear a lot about volunteering, because it's really how we're going to save our country, all of us working together. I'd like to bring Matt Sale, his grassroots coordinator for the region, and tell us about it.
How you doing, everybody? I'm Matt Sale. I'm a grassroots coordinator in the Harrisburg slice of PA, and I'm here to talk to you about Toastmasters. Okay, Toastmasters is a international group, but in COS we have our own Toastmasters group made up of only COS volunteers. So if you're interested in getting out a message, any message, people aren't listening, maybe it's the way you're delivering it. So we in Toastmasters learn how to do better public speaking. And it's a program. We know the solution, as big as the problem, right? We know that. How do we get that message across? Some of you are already accomplished speakers, but could that be more polished? And people sometimes just don't get it, right? And instead of increasing the volume, let's try to sell COS, not yell COS. For Toastmasters offers a learning program where we need to practice, we give speeches, prepare speeches, also impromptu speeches, and get feedback. So this happens every Thursday morning at 11 a.m. If you're interested, see me or Ruth. And it's for volunteers, meaning you're a volunteer if you have a COS action email address, do you know what I mean? If not, talk to me, Ruth, about that. And the old adage goes, knowledge is power. I say speaking truth will empower action. We are driven to proclaim liberty throughout the land, right? That's on the bell. And you too can be a clarion of COS. Join Toastmasters, COS Freedom Speakers. Thank you.
One of the many, many educational tools that Convention of States offers, so many, I cannot even begin to tell you how rich this organization is beyond really anything I can imagine. We also want Kurt Stein, he's part of Grassroots, District Captain. Kurt, you were going to talk about the election declaration that COS has approved, and that actually an email is going to go out. So here's Kurt, helps in the grassroots scene, and District Captain for Harlesville.
Before I get started, I think it's only proper that we all stand and raise the roof to this beautiful building to thank Ruth for putting on this wonderful event. It's really amazing. You know, she told you earlier that she started in April of last year, and so did I. I might have been an hour or so ahead of her, but she's got all of you, and I have the bike. So she's done an amazing job. So I got into Convention of States. I'm not going to talk about Convention of States, I'll talk about something else. But I got into it because I realized we needed self-governance, and I needed to do something for myself for self-governance. And I realized that the way this country is right now, that we need term limits. I always thought that we could get rid of politicians that were in office by going to the polls and voting them out. That doesn't happen. We need term limits. So, Convention of States. I also realized that if I have to run my household budget and balance it, and I can't run into negative deficits, why shouldn't the government do that? Convention of States, balanced budgets. I also realized that I can't be telling my neighbor's kids what to do. That's parental overreach. But there's also government overreach that we have at the federal level. Convention of States. Put those three things together and it puts me right here. To become an activist, to be self-governing, and to meet wonderful people like Ruth and everyone else in here. So that was last year. Fast forward to this year. We've got problems. None of this can be done if we don't have fair elections. None of it can be done. It starts at the polls. Even though we're going out to vote in very small numbers, with 20% in the last primary and only 40% in a general election, we need to do more. But the more we do, the more others may do to twist it and turn it in their favor. How do we stop that? Who knows about election integrity? Yeah. Election integrity is what we need. And it's not going to be easy to come by. But there's a lot of organizations out there, one in Pennsylvania in particular, that's called Unite PA, is the name of the organization. It's run by a retired CIA operative. His name is Sam Faddis, Faddis. Sam is all over the Fox, and he's on Newsmax, he's on Banner's War Room. He's very well known, but he's put this together, and he wants election integrity. He's actually gone to the Rotunda in Harrisburg on May 11, supported by 70 patriotic and conservative groups in Pennsylvania. And Convention of States is one of those groups. And I believe Matt was there at the signing of the declaration and the writing of this declaration. I'm not sure anyone else. Was there anybody else in this room there? That's a very historical moment. This declaration is being taken to all of our state legislators. It's been hand-delivered to them in Harrisburg for them to sign on. How many have talked to their state legislators and they agree with everything you say, but then when you leave, they do nothing? With this declaration, we're asking them that they're going on record to do something, okay? That's what's important, and that's what we need. Election integrity. We want to get back to in-person voting. We want to get rid of the drop boxes. We want voter ID. Yes, there will be absentee voting because there's some people that can't make it to the polls, but not in the way it is right now where there's no excuses. You can't have that. There's just too much bad things that can happen. So, June 14th is Flag Day. That's just next week. Who else knows an important person's birthday on June 14th?
Donald.
Did you say that, Mary? Kim. I know Mary knows that too. So yes, so Flag Day, which is Tuesday, is a very important day. Now what's happening across the state, the entire state, patriots, conservatives, like all of us in here, are visiting their local state legislators' offices, right? So you're gonna go where your state senator has his local office, your state representative has their local office, and there are groups of people throughout the state that are doing this on Tuesday, June 14th, and we're gonna go and ask them to sign the declaration. If you want more information on this, I will be here in the room and I have a clipboard. I can get your email address and I can send it to you. But if you go by yourself, that's great, but if you can go with a committee, that's important. 70 groups have unified behind this election integrity declaration. We need one voice, we need unity, strength in numbers. Thank you.
Kurt has done a lot of public speaking for convention estates, and sometimes when we're asked to go into many different facilities, Kurt does a super job. As you can hear, I want to take a minute to thank Tracy and Michael. Kadabob is a deli in Newtown, right? And they came to us, surrounded us. So much for doing that, and I'm going to be coming to your deli because it's really wonderful. Really appreciate that. So, and here I have a card for you. Thank you card. So appreciate it. Okay. I want to also bring up, I'm going to start first with Bob and Mary Ann Hessel. These are the folks that I mentioned that have a meeting that they started in May. And they had 26 people, including themselves, come to that event. And they're going to just take a minute to talk about what volunteering means to them.
So like we started, me and Bob, Terry over there, he's in Westchester, my brother Al over here in Delaware County. Just so I know Plymouth meeting can be a little tough for us down south. So we started a group down there just to get people out to meetings. So we do have a meeting on Flag Day as well. I plan on going with the Unite PA group to, I believe, Westchester that day. But then we will be at our meeting at the VFW in Downingtown on Route 30. So if you need any information, you can see Terry or Al or me, Bob, and we can get you information on that. But as far as why I got involved, I'll start with this. Let not your children have reasons to curse you for giving up those rights and prostrating those institutions which our fathers delivered to you. So if you have ever taken any of the Patriot Academy classes, you've learned about that or you've heard it. I know a lot of people in here have taken my class. But I got involved, I started last summer. I was watching OAN and I was watching a local Pennsylvania election integrity event. And the women from Audit the Vote were speaking. And Tony Shoup said something I'll never forget. She said, "It's over my dead body. I'm going to let my kids grow up in this country." And that's exactly how I felt. She's speaking my language and I don't know what to do. But I'm not okay with this and I have to do something. So she proceeded to say that she knew nothing about politics. She never followed the news. but she got herself involved in a class through Patriot Academy to learn about the Constitution so she could start somewhere. Unlike that, I was a news junkie and followed politics very much, but I knew nothing about the Constitution. They don't teach it in schools, they don't teach it to my kids, they don't teach it when I was a kid. So I followed her lead and I went on the Patriot Academy and on Audit the Vote, and I signed up for a 6-week Constitution course with Jamie Sheffield, one of the other women from Audit the Vote. Since I was a member on Patriot Academy, now I was getting the emails. Join the national class. We're only a week in, so now I signed up for the national class, which was led by Rick Green and Mark Meckler and Adam. And I was on with them on Monday nights. I was on with Jamie on Sunday nights. And as I was on the class, I got to learn about COS. I would hear Mark speak about it. And there was one in particular. It was one of the last classes right before we closed in prayer. Mark gave this really great speech. I suggest everybody look it up later. You can find it, not now, obviously, we're busy. But if you go on Rumble and search, there is a cost, Mark Meckler, you will find it. It was a Patriot Academy. It was a three-minute little blurb, but it was very powerful about about not giving up. And this is, we have to do this, and it can be tough. Every time I'm involved with Chesco United, I'll go to some of their things. I go to the commissioners' meetings. I come here to Patriot Academy, and sometimes it's tough. You feel like the other side is beating you down. But every time I feel like that, I look at this 3-minute clip from Mark, and I get right back up. It's a fantastic clip to motivate you. And just like he said in that video, as far as I'm willing to put my life, liberty, and sacred honor on the line. And I'm not going to quit for my kid until that first shovel of dirt hits the top of my box. I'm not going to quit. So that's how I started with COS. I signed up, I signed a petition, and Ruth reached out to me and invited me to the meeting. I came to the meeting. I brought my friend Kathleen. It was my first meeting, and she had asked me about getting more involved, and I was a little reluctant because I was going to commissioners' meetings. At that time, I was fighting in my son's school, and I just started Patriot Academy, and I didn't want to get my hands, I work full time, I didn't want to get my hands in too many things because I didn't want to be ineffective at everything because I put myself in too much. And then I had one night, my husband, who's going to tell you his story, he had an experience and he signed right up, and as soon as he signed up, I felt comfortable at that point. I said, now I have a live-in backup. Me and him can back each other up, and we can get involved and team this out. So that's what we do, and like Kurt said, none of this matters if we don't get the elections. And I think COS is such a huge thing that could help in everything. There's overreach in the education, the elections, there's problems everywhere. We all know it, and a lot of these 3 things could solve that. The government overreach, the term limits. So like I said, I'm all in this with you guys, just like Mark said in that video that I asked you all to look at later. I'm in this with you guys, and I'm not going to stop fighting until that first shovel of dirt hits the top of my box.
So as Marion said, the video that Mark, David, and the Patriot Academy session was what really inspired me. And I think as you guys hear him tonight, you're going to be just as inspired. And I might be stealing your thunder, Mark, but you quoted in that session, quoted Ronald Reagan, that if it's not us, who? If not, when? And after I heard his words and I heard his speech, I grabbed my phone right away and I just figured out, this is how I got to get involved. Because we can do everything we can at such a lower level. And meaning that there's a lot going on in the federal government, there's a lot going on in the state government, but there's a lot going on in our backyards that we need to get involved with. And this is one of the best and easiest ways to start. So I'm not a politician, never felt like I was going to be in politics. I know I'm probably not ever going to be in politics, but I know I can do something. I can do something with COS, and I can do it with Morehouse. And just as Kurt pointed out, Ruth has got you guys all here every once a month, and we've got this big crowd here tonight. We're doing it locally. Our first meeting we had 25 people at. And we're having our next one on the 14th. We're gonna have a bigger number, and we're just gonna keep expanding. So if you feel like there's, like, oh, I can't really do anything, you can. And it could be a simple phone call, an email, a letter. But we gotta contact our legislators, we've gotta talk to them, we've gotta persuade them if they're not already on our path. And it's an easy thing to do. It's gonna happen with numbers, and we just need more boots on the ground.
And I see Marcus is here, so I just have one more thing to say. This was really just perfect. So Becca is sending around a volunteer blue sheet for people to volunteer.
Hi, I'm Rebecca, and I'm the district captain for Prevention of States. And I'm going to be passing around 2 clipboards. It's for volunteer opportunities because we need volunteers. We constantly need volunteers. We're a volunteer army. And we're going to pass this around to 2 different sizes. If you haven't decided yet whether you can give any of your time to volunteer, then these will be out on the table with the petitions after the presentation. Another thing I want to go, we have the best way to get in touch with your local representative and your local senator is to do a handwritten note. They really notice, and it is a great way to get attention to Convention of States to get them to support it. We have in Pennsylvania, it's Senate Resolution 152 and HR 109. Yes. And we have this on the table. There's 2 envelopes and there's 2 cards for you to write your local representatives. You can find out who they are on our website underneath Take Action, and there's a signed petition who has different states. You put in your address, and then we'll give you the names of your senator and your representative. And so there's one for each, and we're going to have this out on the table if you want to take one and bring it home and send a letter to your representatives about Convention of States. So also out there we have these little constitutions, and if you want to take one, we have them at the sign-in table. And of course, we've got the table with petitions on it as well. So I just wanted to tell you to pass around the stuff and about the letters, and that's it. And Mark's here.
This is an amazing group, wonderful group of volunteers. I just have one thing that's very important. It's a great segue for Mark, is that we still have a wonderful State Director, Steve Davies, and he's taking on a position of legislative liaison, which he's been doing. And he is mentoring Jared Bill, who's Steve Patton, who is the Associate Regional for Northeast States, going to introduce the new State Director. And that way also Mark and Steve too. Come on up, Steve. And come on up, Jared. Well, never.
Thank you. So, I'm Steve Patton, and I'm not from Pennsylvania. I'm actually from Maryland. I've been a volunteer for Convention of States for over 4 years in Maryland. I'm a very recent, hiree or employee of Convention of States National, and I was actually asked with the specific purpose to come into Pennsylvania and help organize the grassroots. And I'm a working guy. I publish a small magazine. I work from home. I sit in front of a computer. I've been doing it for, it'll almost be 30 years, a couple more months. And I loved volunteering for COS. I loved it. It was my favorite thing to do in Maryland. And when I was asked to actually bring my skill set into other states, I was absolutely flattered. I didn't even actually know what to say to that, except yeah, sure, I'll do that. So here I am in Pennsylvania, and I am here as a resource. Some of the things you heard tonight, really important things that were stated. So you heard from district captains, and I don't know what everyone's experience is with Convention of States. You might just be a petition signer, you might be a volunteer, you might be a leader, but I want to give a quick 30,000-foot view of involvement with COS and what it looks like. So the first thing you do is you sign the petition. Maybe you heard Mark Levin, maybe you hear Mark Meckler come up and speak, and you sign the petition. The next thing is, do you want to go that extra step? Do you want to actually be an activist and have an effect on what's happening in our country and actually push back on all of the rot that's happening at the federal level? That would involve you becoming actually a volunteer. So that actually involves you going to the tab at conventionofstates.com, not just signing the petition, but actually saying, okay, yeah, I am curious about volunteer opportunities. And there's no commitment to it. It's you're expressing interest with the state team that you would like to have more information about volunteering, what might be involved. The neat thing about getting involved with the state team is there's so many different things to do. There's so many different things to do. If you go to the Take Action page, you're going to see that there are leadership position descriptions. You're going to see there's leadership descriptions. But you know what? Most of the volunteers across the country, at least in my home state of Maryland, where I was volunteer, and still am a volunteer, for the past 4 years, chances are you don't fit one of those exact descriptions, but you can be part of the team, and you can help. And we ask you to please do that. So there's going to be blue sheets going around on a clipboard. So if you're interested in doing anything beyond just signing the petition, and by the way, if you haven't signed the petition, what are you waiting for? But if you're interested in doing just anything beyond just signing the petition and supporting on any level, fill out that blue sheet that's going to go around tonight. Give us your name and number. You'll be contacted by somebody on the Pennsylvania team, and they will get you in the loop with what's going on in your region or statewide and give you a chance to be an activist. Because if you're not an activist, then you're okay with the nightmare that's happening on the federal level. And I know you're not okay with that, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Right? So what I was brought up here to tell you, like I said, I am now a COS employee, which is an absolute fantastic honor, and I actually love doing it. I am still a volunteer in Maryland, by the way. But I actually have been working with the leadership, regional and statewide here in Pennsylvania for a couple of months. I was brought on in February. And one of the first people I met was Ruth. Another round of applause for Ruth, please. And Matt Zale. I shouldn't have done this. I'm going to leave somebody else for this. So I apologize. I'm going to jump right to the other person that I met in the, I guess it's southwest west region. It's Jared Bill. So Jared Bill is doing what Ruth does here in southeast PA. Jared Bill is doing it in southwest west PA, kind of southwest and west PA. And what I get to do is I get to work with him, and I get to actually help him develop a team and grow the team and let district. You heard about some district captains, and that might sound very foreign to you, but district captain, it's not rocket science. It's calling people, interacting with your neighbors. And I got a chance to work with Jared, and Jared actually just jumped at the opportunity, and all of a sudden it was like putting a fish in water. He suddenly could swim. And he did it so well that he actually expressed interest in state leadership. I don't know how many of you know, but Steve Davies has been your state director for a very long time. Great person, great. His legislative skills are probably unmatched by anybody that I've interacted with on the national level and in Maryland. But that's really his skill set. So we're looking in Pennsylvania to actually bring someone else up. And Jared, when we were just talking about it, he said, "Oh, hey, maybe me? You want to consider that?" And then I told him what was involved. He said, "Oh, wait, maybe go, not me." But we talked him into it, so he is actually, it's not official yet, but he is entertaining the idea of being state director. So I would like to quickly introduce Jared Bill, most likely the next state director from Pennsylvania, to say hello and thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks everybody. I'll try to be brief. I know everybody's excited to hear from Mark, so I won't steal the microphone for too long. But yeah, I was excited, and I had to jump back whenever Steve told me I had to start carrying his luggage, and that was the oh no part. No, but in all seriousness, you know, Steve Davies has been a true patriot in Pennsylvania, and over the past 8 years, I have no idea the countless sacrifices he's made. Real quickly, if you don't mind, just join me in a round of applause for Steve Davies. Without Steve really, charging forward, we wouldn't be where we're at right now. So we really owe a lot to what he's done, the trail that he's blazed for us. And I'm extremely excited to learn from him. He's not running out the door. I'll be working with him over the next few months for the rest of the year. And as I said, Steve is a true patriot. This sort of stuff runs in his blood. So I don't think he can walk away even if he wanted to. So rest assured, he'll still be around in some capacity at the state director level. So I just want to tell you just a tiny bit about myself. So I live 20 minutes north of Pittsburgh, and in that area we're fighting hard to organize, and I'm really excited and humbled and honored to be the next person to carry the football forward. I don't have to tell this room, but Pennsylvania has always, in the past, has risen to challenges. Just 25 minutes from here, all of our liberty was born. And, I think Pennsylvanians are ready to stand up and fight again. I think it's time, and I think we have to all jump in to do it. I'm not going to be able to do this by myself. As you can see, this is a grassroots organization. It's all going to take us all working together to get the job done, and I look forward to doing that with you guys. So with that, Steve, Ruth, if you want to take the mic and introduce Mark. Thank you so much.
Let's welcome Mark, founder and president of Convention of States.
Thank you guys. A little bit out of sorts tonight, and I apologize for being a little bit tardy. I hate being tardy. My family, I don't know, you guys might have families like this. In my family, my wife's idea of being on time is you leave when you're supposed to be somewhere. I just saw you poking it. And my attitude is, if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. So today, I flew in relatively early into the airport in Philly. I stayed at the hotel there, the Marriott that's right on campus there at the airport. I even got a nap in today, I'm happy to say. It's been a little bit of a long week. And then I thought, this is going to be no problem. I'm just going to pull out of the parking garage and I'm going to drive to the meeting. Well, it took me 35 minutes to get out of the garage at the Philly airport. So I'm a little bit out of sorts. I got a little bit lost here at the mall. Anybody have a challenge finding this place yet? It's a little bit of a challenge for me. I'm pretty challenged. I'm not one of these fancy schmancy guys that when I travel, I've got a driver or people who take me around. People do tell me where to go. And generally speaking, the way I run my days, when I show up in a city, usually somebody says you have to be at this place at this time in the morning. I show up there, and the rest of the day, people just tell me what to do. So coming into a city on my own and being on my own, I just think it's very irresponsible of the people who scheduled me. Don't you think so? I cannot be trusted, that's for sure. I'm really excited to be here. This is the end of an Eastern Seaboard tour for me. And it's something that I've been talking about doing for, it's probably 2 years now. I've been to Pennsylvania quite a few times. I had not been for Convention of States to Maryland or to Delaware, so I had a chance to go to both of those states. I was in New Jersey, so I've been all over the Eastern Seaboard, and it's been incredibly inspiring for me. If you travel around the country like I do, and I travel between red states and blue states, I go to all of them. I've been to 48 states, and I go to the state capitals in all of them. And if you go to the deep red states around the country, theoretically, my state, Texas, is a deep state. I say theoretically, not really quite true. If you go to states like Oklahoma, or Kansas, or Iowa, and you talk about the Eastern Seaboard, it's kind of dismissive, the attitude in those places. And it's not because of you guys, it's because of what they see in the news, right? And they see New York, and they see Manhattan, and they see New Jersey, and they see Newark, and they see Pennsylvania, and they see Philly. And these are the things that they think when they think about the Eastern Seaboard. And so I think they're fairly dismissive of these states, and I have a completely different perspective. Because when I come to these places, what I get to do is to hang out with people like you, right? And I get to see what I call the real people in these states, the real cities in these states. I'm generally not just in the big cities. I'm in the suburbs. I'm in the farm country. You know, I'm an hour and a half, 2 hours out of the city, and I see the people that make America great in all of these places. In the last week I was in Maryland, I mentioned that, and where Steve's from, and I was with Steve in Maryland, and we're out on a farm, out in front of this old tobacco barn. There were about 180 people showed up. I didn't know there were 180 people in Maryland. I was pretty impressed by that. Steve did a good job there. I was in Delaware, a much smaller state. If I had gone to Delaware, to the state capital, literally 2 years ago, with the Convention of States team, it would have been me and 4 other people, maybe. And we had 125 people in the baking sun at the Delaware State Capitol in Dover on a weekday. Incredible. And so this is what I'm seeing as I travel around the country. I was in North Carolina yesterday, and we were at the state capitol in North Carolina. And in North Carolina, I've been going there, I've been there a bunch of times, probably as much as any state in the country. And they have what's called the Halifax Mall. It's between 2 office buildings, which are the Senate and the House office buildings. And we go there, and I remember when I used to go there, and we get, 20, 25 people show up at the mall. And I was excited by it. Get 25 people, and you bring them to the legislature, and they go around and they talk to their legislators, and that's a pretty good crowd to bring to the mall. And by the way, we figured out, and you guys might want to pick up on this tip if you have a big rally, figured out how to get a lot of people around. I figured out how to get Democrats to show up at a Convention of States rally. We have a llama that comes. They literally, the Democrat legislators come out to take their picture with the Liberty Llama. Not us, not me, not Rick Santorum, not Rick Green, not Alan West. They're not interested. Get a llama there. I don't know what it is about the farm animals, but maybe we can bring the llama over here. But we had yesterday on the Halifax Mall in the North Carolina legislature, somewhere between, I lost count, I'd say between 750 and 1,000 people. Incredible. That's pretty good, right? So I thought it was pretty good. And then I asked the state legislator, have you ever seen a conservative group show up with this many people on the mall here at the state legislature? And they said, never. Never in history. They said, on the left, yeah, because, you can pay 750 union members to show up. But actual real volunteers, no, we don't see that. And so then I come here to Pennsylvania, and here we are in a church, which is my favorite place to be, in a church on a weeknight in Pennsylvania, in Plymouth meeting, and we get this kind of a crowd. You guys should be really proud of yourselves. You guys also threw me out really bad. You totally screwed up my travel plans this week, and I'm going to blame you guys if you live here. Which is, so on my calendar, it said Plymouth meeting. Okay, I can handle that, so that means I got a meeting in Plymouth, right? And by the way, there is a town called Plymouth near Scranton. So all of my travel was booked to Scranton and home, right? And so I don't know who warned us about this, but somebody said, well, where are you flying into? And I said, Scranton. They said, well, that's about 2.5 hours from Plymouth meeting. Why aren't you flying into Philly? And so it launched a scrambled panic about 48 hours ago to redo all the travel. So, and then I talked to Rick Santorum, and I told him the story, and he basically said, you're an idiot, man. Everybody knows where Plymouth meeting is. So now I know where Plymouth meeting is. So you guys are already taught me something, which is awesome. The reason that I do what I do is because I love America. And I know that sounds really broad, and I know you all feel exactly the same way, but I mean something more specific when I say I love America. And by that, I mean I love Americans. And we're Americans by virtue of where we live. Some of us, maybe somebody in this room, has chosen to live here. To the immigrants who come because they believe in this land of opportunity. To those who come legally, I say, God bless you for coming here and making the choice to be an American. It is an incredible thing to be an American, and it is a birthright, or it is an immigration right. It is something that some people choose, some are born to it, and it makes us extraordinary. And I get to travel all over the country, and I get to meet great Americans everywhere I go. You ever heard the phrase people say, well, we're just ordinary Americans? I don't meet any of them. I don't know what that is. I meet extraordinary Americans everywhere I go. And if I sat down with any one of you in this room tonight, one-on-one, if we got a chance to break bread together, have a conversation, what I would probably say to you at some point during lunch or dinner, whatever it is tell me your story. And what most people would say to me is, I don't really have much of a story. You know, I'm just a regular person. But if I dig, and I know this from experience, and if I really ask and if I probe, which I love to do because I love people and I love their stories, I'm going to hear an amazing story. I'm going to hear a story about somebody who has had highs and lows in their life, who's been on the peaks and looked out across the horizon. I'm going to hear about the valleys that you've been in, the pits of despair, and how you overcame, and how you turned to God, how you turned to your family, how your neighbors helped, how your friends helped. I'm going to hear an amazing American success story. Because there's nobody that's ordinary in this country. And that's what makes this country so amazing. It's not because of the land, it's not because of even the Constitution, it's not because of our ideology, it's because of the individuals. And there's something wired into us, into our national DNA. And I say DNA, it doesn't mean you have to be born to it. Like you could, in my opinion, you could be born an American if you live in Venezuela, or if you live in communist China, but you have a certain thing in your heart, in your soul, a certain craving for freedom, a certain belief in individuality, a certain belief in self-governance. People who live under totalitarian regimes, some people have this in their hearts. It's hardwired in. God put it in them. And people come to this country, or people born in this country and raised up in this country, and it's inside of us, and that's an extraordinary thing, this connection to the idea of self-governance. If we talk about Convention of States, and Convention of States, most people don't even realize it's a project of an organization, which was the original parent organization, called Citizens for Self-Governance. So I invented that name. It's a terrible name. Like it's such a horrible brand, and we debated it and we discussed it when we came with Citizens for Self-Governance. Nobody knows what self-governance is. What does that mean? You have to try to explain it to people. Having a brand that you have to explain to people is a bad idea. But we stuck with it because we realized if we are not a self-governing people, if we lose the idea that it's up to us individually to fix whatever ails our country, to fix whatever's wrong with ourselves, to fix whatever's wrong with our communities, if we move away from this do-it-yourself kind of idea that we are as a nation, then we lose the essence of what it means to be American. And so we became Citizens for Self-Governance. That's like 12 years ago. And I would say 12 years ago, if you did a search in the media, if you Googled the words self-governance, you would find very few references. I know, because we did it. If you Google that today, you'll find millions of references to self-governance. And I'm proud to say we reinserted that phrase into the American lexicon, this idea of self-governance. It's really an extraordinary thing. How many people in this room have traveled out of the country? Raise your hand if you've been out of the country. So most of the people in the room have been in other countries. And if you pay attention to the culture of other countries, I'll do my best to stand in front of your camera. I'm terrible that way.
Would you do us a huge favor?
Sure.
Tip your hat back. So
Oh, there we go. How's that?
Thanks.
All right. See, I can take instructions. I've been married 28 years. So if you travel to other countries, and I'm going to give you an example of what happens in another country that shows you how self-governing we are here in America. I spent a bunch of time in Asia, spent a bunch of time in Japan. I love the Japanese culture, love Japanese food, love the warmth of the Japanese people. But Japanese people are very much rule followers, right? And this is the culture in most of the world. There's a boss, and the boss sets the rules, and if you want to do something different, you ask permission before you do something, right? And so if you were to walk into a restaurant right now, if a group of us walked into a restaurant, there are 8 of us, and there was no hostess sitting at the station there, and we saw 2 tables, and each table had 4 seats, then we would be likely to say, hey, somebody, let's push these tables together, and we'll make an 8-seater table, right? Anybody ever do that? Yeah. If you tried to do that in Japan, everybody in the restaurant would freak out. What are you doing? You have to ask the boss. And like people would panic, literally. I've done it. People panic because you're breaking the rules. Because you don't do that yourself, you have to ask permission. But in America, we're a do-it-yourself nation. We always have been by necessity. The people who came out over here on the Mayflower, right? They weren't asking permission, right? They got chased out. They were seeking religious liberty. They came across an ocean. Nobody gave them permission to land at Plymouth Rock. By the way, have you guys been to Plymouth Rock? Yeah, the rock is not impressive, is it? It was going to be big. I thought Grand Canyon got there. Monument to the forefathers, though. If you go to Plymouth, that's the thing you see. Anyway, so they came over here. They didn't ask anybody permission. They set up their colony, and there's a colony set up at Jamestown. They weren't asking anybody's permission. They made their own rules. They did it their own way. And we've done that as a country forever. We don't ask permission. We fix it ourselves. We do it ourselves. We build it ourselves. We build things and do things that are absolutely impossible. We built a nation that was impossible. Literally. Think about how our nation was formed. We fought a revolution against the greatest empire ever known to mankind. The British Empire. The height of art and literature and culture and military prowess and technology at the time. The largest fighting force ever assembled in human history. The most well-paid, well-fed, well-trained, well-armed, largest fighting force in human history. We fought that fighting force because we just do stuff ourselves. And we do things that other people think are crazy. Right? We said, we're going to go to the moon. That seems crazy. We went to the moon, right? We said, we're going to defeat fascism worldwide in World War II. What were we thinking? That was bigger than our country, but it was not bigger than our ideals. Because we are the original DIY nation. It seems like they should have known about Home Depot back then, but that came much later in our history. So where does that idea come from? Where does this idea that we are a nation born of self-governance come from? You know, if you look at the American Revolution, by the time we fight the American Revolution, we already believed in this idea of self-governance, right? I mean, this is why we're willing to fight. My favorite story from American history is the story of a guy by the name of Levi Preston. Now, if you've ever heard me talk, you know I like the name Levi. Anybody know who Levi is in my life? There's a few people. Levi's my dog, that's right. I named my dog after an American Revolutionary War hero. And here's why I did it, because I love this story so much. You understand, I love the American people. I love what it means to be an American. And the essence of self-governance comes from a guy by the name of Levi Preston. Most people don't know Preston's real story. They've never heard his name. I say Levi Preston. Most people don't know who he is. It's one of the tragedies of American history, because when we study American history, we study it based on what I call the great man theory of history, right? But there are movers and shakers, and there are people who are the fulcrums of history, the levers of history. George Washington, Adams, Madison, Jefferson, Patrick Henry says, give me liberty or give me death. We all know those guys, right? Every one of them. We know those guys. Right back there in the back of the room, we got them. So we know these people from American history. But the truth is, they're a tiny, teeny slice of American history. They don't really represent what the regular people were in American history. These are the heroes. They're the people, they wrote stuff, they gave speeches, they rode into battle on white horses. That's why we know about them. But what about all the men and women and families that actually fought, that actually sacrificed and died in the revolution? Most of them we don't know. A lot of them buried anonymously on battlefields, bodies never recovered by their families, stories never told. But we do know the story of Captain Levi Preston. See, Preston fought at Concord. And when he went out to fight that day, when the shot was heard around the world, he was 23 years old. He was a farmer. He had a wife and kids. He was not a military guy. But when the Minutemen were called, he went to fight. And the only reason that we know Levi Preston's story is because many, many years later, in 1843, Mellon Chamberlain was traveling around the country, and he was a young historian, and he was collecting the stories of the last remaining Minutemen. In 1843, they'd have been in their late 80s or early 90s. There were not a lot of them left. The average life expectancy back then was 54 for a male. So you think about that, and he was collecting stories of people in their late 80s, early 90s. If you went into a town and you asked who's the oldest person in town, and somebody was 80 or 90 years old, everybody knew that was like Methuselah living in your town back then. Really incredible. So he goes, he's in North Carolina, and he comes across the town, and Captain Levi Preston's living in the town, and he finds Captain Preston, and he asks him a series of questions. Because he wants to understand, in 1843, the origins of the American Revolution. Where did it come from? Why did you go fight? Right? Stuff we still want to know today. And he kind of thought that he already knew. And Mellon Chamberlain, in a telling of this story, says that he thought he already knew. But he really didn't. He asked him this series of questions. He said, Captain Preston, when you went out to fight that day, when you went to fight the Redcoats, what was it that you meant in doing so? Preston repeated the question, what did we mean? And he said, yes, was it the Stamp Act? Were you frustrated having to buy the stamps and it was a tax without representation, it was unfair and unjust? Preston says, I'm sure I never bought one. Governor Bernard locked them all in the harbor. So it wasn't the Stamp Act. So he says, well, it wasn't the tax on British tea, it was the high tax on British tea. And he said, son, I was a farmer, we never drank any tea, we drank coffee. The boys dropped it in the harbor and that was that. So it's not the tea tax, it's not the Stamp Act. So he says, well, maybe you were reading the great revolutionary writers, you were reading Milton and Burke, Montesquieu, and he said, I've never heard of those men. We read the Bible, Catechism, Psalms, some of us read the Almanac, but those men you speak of, I know not those names. So it wasn't the writers, the Stamp Act, the tea tax. Here's a guy who actually went and fought. And so he says, well, maybe it was the heavy-handed British tyranny. You were just tired of tyranny, and you revolted against the tyranny. He said, tyranny never fell to win. No tyranny, no taxes, no stamps, no great writers or orators inspiring Captain Preston, yet he went out and fought that day. So Chamberlain is stumped. He says, well, what was it then? Why did you go fight? And he said, son, when we went out to face them redcoats, we meant only one thing. We had always governed ourselves. We always intended to. Them redcoats, they intended that we shouldn't. That's important. That is the essence of the American political philosophy at the time of the American Revolution. Said by a man who actually was willing to put his life and his family and his livelihood and everything on the line. And I think it's the most representative statement you will hear of the political theory of that time. This is what people thought. Because for a very long time they had governed themselves. You know, I mentioned the Pilgrims, and you've got the Mayflower Compact, the first compact here in the New World. The Mayflower Compact, a governing compact. And then if you jump forward in American history and you think about how did you study American history when you were a kid, you're going to go from the Mayflower Compact, and the next major event in American history is the Revolution. That's how I studied it. Now, you got to forgive me, I went to school in Los Angeles, California, so maybe I missed some stuff. Just saying. Had to make up a lot, remedial history. But the reality is that's how it is in most schools. You're going to study Jamestown, the Mayflower Compact, Pilgrims, and then you're going to jump forward to the American Revolution. How long between the Mayflower Compact and the American Revolution? Anybody know offhand? It's just really interesting. When I got asked that question, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. In fact, I'm not the smartest guy in any room, certainly not this room. But I just didn't have an answer. It's like I went to that file cabinet in the back of my head. It was just an empty, dusty drawer with cobwebs in it. There was no answer. Thinking, I don't know, 75 years, 100 years? I had no idea, really. I could have guessed, but it was just a guess. It's 158 years between the signing of the Mayflower Compact and the beginning of the American Revolution. That's a long time. Generationally, that's at least 5 generations. So it's weird because we study American history and we go from the Mayflower Compact to the American Revolution and nothing happens in 158 years. Nothing. How can that be true? It can't be true. So when I first realized that, I heard Levi Preston's story. I want to know, why does Levi Preston have this attitude? Why is he so connected to this idea of self-governance? Why is it so obvious and so inside of him, so in his DNA, that he's willing to fight and die for it? I had to know. And so I started trying to find books about it. Aren't many books about that period in American history. I looked, I couldn't find much online, I couldn't find a lot about it, very little to read. And I happened to be blessed because I had a daughter at the time, she's since graduated, who was at Hillsdale College in Michigan. My daughter Lucy went to Hillsdale College, and she was in her first year at Hillsdale College when this question came up. And Patty and I had donated a little money at Hillsdale College because we loved the college so much. And so I got a chance to go to their homecoming football game. And because I had donated a little bit of money, I had a chance to sit in the president's box at Hillsdale's homecoming football game. Now I know that sounds really fancy, it's not. It's like a high school, it's like a small high school. Right, so we're sitting in this little box together, and I happen to be sitting next to Larry Arnn. You guys know Larry Arnn, right? the president of Hillsdale College, great man, brilliant guy, great thinker, and this guy knows a lot about American history. And I thought, man, I'm going to find out about this period in American history. So it's the middle of the first quarter. I found myself sitting directly next to Larry Hard, and I lean over to him, and I say, hey, Larry, I have a question for you. And he just looks at me. And I said, I'm trying to figure out this period in American history, like right before the American Revolution. And I want to know, has anybody written any books about the period from Jamestown to the time of the American Revolution? And he said, I have only one answer for you. And I said, yes. He goes, could you please shut up until after I I'm not kidding. That's exactly what he said. God, he's hilarious, but he was serious. And so he watched the football game, I watched the football game at halftime. I got to chat with him about this, and he turned me on to some really great books. If you're interested in that period, Bernard Bailyn, B-A-I-L-Y-N, writes some books about that period in history, and Pauline Maier, M-A-I-E-R. Odd spellings for both the names, and great historical writers. And what I learned from reading about that period in American history is it's the most important period in American history. Kids ought to study it. We all ought to study it, because during that period in American history, we learn as a people, as a nascent nation, to govern ourselves. We figure it out. We bring some of our institutions over from the old countries. People have a pretty deep understanding of the Bible and biblical history. They understand world history. There's a lot of people that read philosophy, Greek history, Roman history are widely known. People are very literate at the time. Remember, there's no television, there's no YouTube, there's no movies, there's no recorded music, so people read for entertainment. And so there's a lot of reading going on, and so people understand these histories, and out of this, we become a self-governing people. So by the time Levi Preston is challenged by the Redcoats on the field of battle, his father governed himself, his father's father, father's father's father, and so on for 5 generations. So to Levi Preston, the idea that some Redcoats were going to come to town and tell him how to live his life, outrageous, unbelievable. Who do these people think they are? Remember, Preston was a true American. Though he was a British subject, he was not British by mentality. He was British by birth, he was British by law, but by mentality, he was an American. And so he is the essence of what it means to be American, and that history tells us where we get it from. So let's jump forward over 2 centuries to where we're at today. I can guarantee you, in this room today, every single one of you has that feeling inside of you. When the government says, this is how you're allowed to use your property, it just grinds you. When the government tells you, this is what kind of car you can drive, this is what kind of fuel you can put in your car, this is what kind of paint you can paint your house with, this is how you have to wear your seatbelt, this is how you have to wear your helmet, this is what kind of toilet you're allowed to have in your house. Imagine Ben Franklin. Oh, Dr. Franklin, I'm afraid your outhouse is using too much water. I think Franklin would have pushed him in his outhouse, is what I think would happen. You know, several years back, I built a new office on our old property in California. I can say this publicly now because I don't live in California anymore. And during construction of the new office, we built a barn. I have to say I built it with no permits because I just wasn't going to do that deal with the city and the county. And along the way, my contractor came up to me one day and very quietly said, hey, Mark. And I said, yeah. He goes, come here, I got something to show you. And he takes me over to the trailer behind his truck and he drops the trailer. And sitting in the back of his trailer is a toilet. I'm like, yes, Tom, that's a toilet. I've seen those before. He's like, would you like this toilet? Is there a reason I should like this toilet? He goes, this is a real toilet. It actually flushes the real amount of water before the new regulations. And he says, don't tell anybody I gave you this, because it's illegal. Like, so you're turning me into a toilet bandit. I just want you to know, I am a true blue rebel. Yes, I am a toilet rebel. That's the honest. See, I don't live in California anymore, so I can't get in trouble there. So imagine the founders, the framers, being under this kind of regulation and authority of government. I mean, you think that what Levi Preston was chafing under was absolutely nothing compared to what we live under today. They would find it outrageous. The idea of an income tax from the federal government, they would find outrageous. A standing army, they would find outrageous. And so many simple things in our lives that we just take for granted, they would find outrageous. So you are inheritors of that political DNA. This idea that we have always governed ourselves and we always should. So we come forward to the modern era and the country is blowing up, right? I mean, yesterday, we had somebody go to a Supreme Court justice's house with the idea of murdering him. Thank God he didn't pull it off. Thank God he didn't even get off the shot, got arrested. Seems like half of our country thinks that's okay. Did you see there was polling that came out today? Literally, 50% of Democrats under the age of 40 say it's okay to assassinate your political opponents. That's pretty scary, isn't it? Don't get too smug. 40% of Republicans say the same thing. This is serious stuff. We live in very serious times. In this country today, we don't really like each other. By the way, on that 40% stat, if you hear anybody talk that way, shut it down. I'm just telling you, that's not healthy. We're not going to survive as a country like that. If they want to go off on that tangent, if the left wants to go off, we know where political violence comes from. It comes from the left. Our job is to fight peacefully for as long as we can fight peacefully. So if you think about the countries coming apart, right? And this is a new thing in America. Because if you look at all of American history from the very beginning up until just the last couple of years, we've all always gotten along really well, right? Really? You don't have to agree with me just because I say it. No, of course not. Our entire history is about fractious, divided, arguing, disputive, we're just like a boiling cauldron of different opinions across this cold country for our entire history. And everybody wants it to feel like, people try to make it seem like the media, especially, tonight there's a television special to tell us how much worse this is than it's ever been before in all of American history. That's where they tell us we're at, right? You know, before the American Revolution, like right before the Revolution, leading up to it, you had 13 different colonies, and those colonies all loved each other and got along perfectly. It was like a storybook, right? They hated each other. They literally hated each other. It was mostly along Christian sectarian lines. You know, the Pennsylvanians hated the Virginians, who hated the Marylanders, and then there was Rhode Island. I don't know, everybody hated people from Rhode Island. I feel like it's still that way today. I don't know what's going on out there. So that's the way the country was. And yet we joined arms and we fought a war against the King of England. Incredible. Our George against their George, right? George Washington, George III, King of England. We joined arms and we fought a war because there was an existential threat. Because they were coming over here to tell us what to do, and thousands upon thousands, like Levi Preston said, no, you can't tell me what to do. Existential threat. You turn outward, you join arms with your fellow countrymen, and you face the threat, and that's what we did. And at the end of the revolution, what was so cool, because we actually fought battles together, regiments from different states, standing side by side, fighting side by side, dying side by side on the battlefield, that creates, you know, what we call, what military guys call the band of brothers effect, right? And so when the war was over, all these colonies all loved each other, and it was so great, they formed this incredible government where everybody got along, right? No, they hated each other. They went back to their states, they tried to form a government, they called it the Articles of Confederation, right? And under the Articles of Confederation, the primary unifying factor under the Articles of Confederation is, I'm from Pennsylvania and I know better. So I'm going to trust you from Virginia or Maryland or Delaware, and so I'm going to give you no power. And Maryland said the same thing, and it was small states versus big states, and it was slave states versus non-slave. It was terrible. And in fact, we formed a government that absolutely did not work at all, right? It didn't function because we didn't trust each other. And so then in 1787, we get together in convention. Everybody knows the story, the Philadelphia story, that hot summer we're in convention. But the awesome thing is they get into convention, they close those doors, they board up the windows, and it's like a yoga retreat. Like it's nirvana. Everybody loves each other, everybody trusts each other. No, these guys don't like each other. They accuse each other of stuff. There are parochial interests. You have big states versus small states, slave states versus free states. You have guys in there with personal interests, surveyors that own hundreds of thousands of acres of land or claims of land, one state to another. They didn't like each other. It was hard, and they were there for months. And the convention almost came apart dozens of times. So bad at one point that Franklin calls for prayer among everybody. Remember this? He says basically, we always prayed during the revolution. We came together in this very hall, in Independence Hall, and we prayed for providence, the guidance of providence. And we need to do it now. We have to do it now because otherwise how we're going to form up a great nation without God's guidance? You know that story, right? Everybody knows that story is told over and over. Here's the part of that story that's never told. Do you know they didn't agree to pray? Like everybody thinks they agreed to pray after that. Like so the story is Franklin calls them all to pray and they all agree. They couldn't agree to pray because you were supposed to pay pastors at that time or ministers to pray for you, to come in and pray for you. And they had an agreement that they weren't going to pay anybody who was at convention, so they couldn't figure out how to do it, so they didn't agree to pray. Now the good news is they all decided to go to their own places of worship before they came in the mornings to convention and pray. So they actually did pray, but they couldn't agree to pray together. This is how much they couldn't get along. And out of that bubbling cauldron of distrust and dislike and hatred and anger and envy and greed and personal interest and everything that's bad about human beings because we're all flawed sinners, comes the greatest form of government ever known to man. Not in spite of that stuff, but because of that stuff. Because they come up with a system known as a federalist system. And the essence, the bottom layer of the system of federalism says, don't like you, don't trust you, not going to give you any power over me, don't really like you I'm not so sure about, maybe for now. But we got to do some things together. Because there are existential threats. Because the French, while they pretend they're our allies, they'd like to take us over. The British, they're not done with us, they'd like to take us over still. You got all kinds of people out there, the Spanish, they got some claims, they'd like to take us over. So we're going to have to figure out how to get along because there's some stuff we got to do together, a limited amount of things. 17 original enumerated powers given to the federal government because we had to, because there was an existential threat. So we form up the greatest country ever known on earth, and that is the United States of America. Am I right about that, by the way? That's true. So looking at the United States of America, the great part is after you come out of convention, then what happens is now we're all in agreement, everybody gets along perfectly for the rest of the history, right? Because we're the same as we've ever been. We're fractious. We've got regional differences. We've got state-to-state differences. We've got very fundamental human differences. And one of them that festers, the most important one as part of our national history, is we got the issue of slavery, which is not resolved in convention. And it's a deep, deep wound. It is a sin that we imbue in our Constitution because we know we can't deal with it at the time, but we know that that wound is going to have to be lanced at some point. And in the 1860s, we end up having a civil war over slavery. Right? So a country that doesn't like each other so much that 700,000 of its citizens go to war, killed or maimed in battle, and ultimately we end slavery and we force a union on half of the country that doesn't want it. And thank God we did. And thank God good and right and freedom and liberty prevailed. But I just want you to understand the picture. It's not because we all loved each other and because we got along. Because we had a system, ultimately, that could handle this, the system of federalism. And then as you go past the 1860s and go past the Civil War, and everything after that's just easy street, right? Not, of course not. I mean, in the South, it's basically they reinvent slavery through Jim Crow laws, and there's all this distrust, and there's all this bad stuff going on all over the country. And Mississippi is not the same as New York, and New York is not the same as other states. And so there's all this distrust and dislike among people because we're a big country at that point. We're geographically diverse, we're culturally diverse. Right? If you live in Biloxi, Mississippi, and you go to New York, which most people don't do at the time, what you're going to find is you're going to find yourself in a different country. The culture's the same, or it's different. The language sounds different. The food's different. The entertainment's different. Everything's different. The transportation systems are different. The cities are laid out differently. It literally is the same if you go from Mississippi to New York as going Mississippi to France. In fact, Mississippi might be closer related to France, right? Louisiana certainly closer related to France. And so we have this diversity in the country. Oh, by the way, when I say diversity, I mean real diversity, like cultural diversity, thought diversity is what I'm referring to. And so we've got this diversity in the country, and ultimately that stays, that's the nature of the country. And then you get to World War II. I'm jumping through history, there's a lot more here, but I'm going to jump through. Get to World War II and something amazing happens in America in World War II, but it's also consistent. I want you to see the through line here. We get to the point where there is an existential threat against the United States of America, right? Fascism is rising around the world. We're attacked by Japan in Pearl Harbor, but we have an existential threat. So what do Americans do? We've already shown this. What do we do when there's an existential threat? We get together, man. We join arms, and we turn and we face our foes, and we act like, well, hey, we're brothers and sisters. We've always loved each other. What are you talking about? What are you talking about, Willis? Right? Somebody gets my old TV every time. Thank you. I'm dating myself. So we go to war. We do the impossible. We defeat fascism. We come home, and the country's actually really united at this point in American history. It's pretty extraordinary. It doesn't mean that we're not doing anything wrong. It doesn't mean we've erased all our societal sins, but there's a sense of unity. Women, by and large, have gone into the workforce in bigger numbers than ever before. We've recycled. We've bought savings bonds. Everybody lost people in the war. We all followed the war together on newsreels and the movie theaters, and we're pretty united. And out of that comes the biggest economic boom period in American history. When we talk about the American dream, that's where it comes from. It's the house and the suburbs. Here, it's the picket fence. It's the 2 kids and the dog, and everybody's chasing that dream. And everybody's working on that together. And we get what I call the veneer of unity. You know, we're here, so I'm going to say, picture the Liberty Bell. And you put the veneer of unity over the Liberty Bell, right? It's like this thin layer. And in the 1950s, we get network television, right? I'm not quite old enough. Some of you might be old enough to remember the advent of network TV. Now, network TV means if you live in Philadelphia and if you live in Mississippi, you can watch the same television shows. Right? You can watch The Honeymooners, and you get into Father Knows Best, and Leave It to Beaver, all these things. Now we're watching the same television together. So we're kind of the same. Right? Whether we live in Mississippi or Kansas or New York City, we're kind of the same. And because you get the advent of national television, you get the advent of national advertising. So now we start using the same brand of products. So it's Borax soap, it's Lucky Strike cigarettes. I can actually go from New York to Mississippi or vice versa, and I can get some of the same products. I'm going to feel a little bit at home. I can watch the same TV maybe in my hotel room in New York that I could in Biloxi, Mississippi. So we're starting to feel the same. The culture is starting to unite all across the country. You go from there, you go into the 1960s, late 50s, early 60s, we get franchising. It's hard to remember before McDonald's was everywhere, Wendy's was everywhere, the same gas station everywhere, the same grocery stores everywhere. That's what it's like now, right? I go to the suburbs, in any state, in any city, it's the same. That's what starts to happen in the 1960s. So now if I wanted to drive my car, get in my Chevrolet, and I want to drive from Biloxi, Mississippi to New York City, along the way I can stay in the same hotel, eat at the same restaurants, shop in the same grocery stores, buy my same Lucky Strike cigarettes at the same gas station all the way. And when I get to New York City, it's not a foreign country anymore. It's kind of the same, except for it's not. And we start to, in the 1960s, realize it's really not. Because in the 1960s, we get another major culture shifting event. You get the Vietnam War. And when the Vietnam War happens, there is a societal schism that takes place. And people that are like me, I was a little kid back then, but if I'd have been alive back then, I'd have been thinking, what the hell is going on here? Right? There's people protesting in the streets, they're throwing Molotov cocktails at police, there's half-naked people running away, and psychedelic music, and psychedelic drugs, and free love, and if you were a church-going Christian back then, you're just thinking, oh my gosh, Satan has broken out in the streets all around the country. So you have the veneer of unity, but like the Liberty Bell underneath it, there's a little crack. You know that crack is there, and society's starting to peel apart, right? And over the decades, that crack has gotten worse and worse. We still have the veneer of unity. We watch the same TV. Finally started getting into national sports leagues, the MLB, the NBA, the NFL. Any hockey fans in here? I'm a hockey guy, so some of you guys, NHL, right? We're not missing a game tonight, are we?
Yes.
Oh, man, I'm so sorry. All right, so we'll watch it later recorded. So all this stuff is happening. The veneer of unity is still there, but this crack's taking place underneath. Now I'm going to jump forward. There's a lot more here. We had more time to cover it all, but I'm going to jump forward to right now. So we come to right now. And now in America, if you are a Christian conservative in America, that's how I describe myself. Even if you're just a Christian in America, you're looking at what's going on and you're thinking, what in God's name is happening in this country? We got people on television, we got politicians openly professing, we got people in the streets openly professing that you can kill a baby that's 9 months in the womb. That you can kill a baby after it comes out of the womb. And I'm thinking, what happened to safe, legal, and rare? Wasn't that what my opponents used to say on this issue? And now it's like, no, we just kill a baby whenever we want. We're good with that, right? And I'm thinking, I don't know those people. I don't like those people. I'm not even sure I want to be in a country with those people. And that's what I'm thinking, right? And I'm thinking about, I'm just looking at all the stuff I see on TV. They're teaching my kids that they should be racist. Like, I don't understand this. When I grew up, I don't know about y'all, but when I grew up, the words of Dr. Martin Luther King were a truism. That you judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. It wasn't like a discussion that we had about that. There was no debate around that. It wasn't like, oh, is that a good idea? Is that not a good idea? And nowadays, in the schools, what they're teaching our kids is, you look at somebody's color, and then you make a bunch of decisions and assumptions about them like that. First, I'm saying that's evil. Not just evil. That's not how we judge human beings. So I'm looking at those people, I'm saying, that's evil. That's evil. Right? Now they want to teach our kids some weird, bizarre, sexual grooming ideology when they're 5 years old. Like, I'm thinking, I used to think, man, it was a little bit much in junior high when I had to look at pictures of girls' anatomy, right? It was pretty radical stuff, learning sex education when I was in 6th grade or 7th grade. Now they're teaching 5-year-olds that they're not boys, they're not girls, there are 875 genders, and you can switch between them, and maybe you're actually a cat. And I'm just thinking, what the hell is going on here? So that's me in America today. I don't know if that speaks to you. Then the flip side, by the way, is those who have a different ideology than me, what I would describe as the opposite ideology as me. They look at me and they say, there is a 60-year-old white Christian guy. Throw into the fact that I'm Jewish too, so that makes it even messier, right? And so if I'm a 60-year-old white Christian Jew, that means I'm a Nazi, I'm a white supremacist, I'm an Islamophobe, I'm the same as Hitler, I hate women, I hate gay people, and that's the way they look at me, and they're looking at me going like, I'm not sure I want to live in a country with that guy, right? They actually hate us. They hate people like us, deeply hate people like us. So this is where our country's at today. Is that right? You guys agree with that assessment? Okay. So this is where our country's at. So we really don't like each other. Is it worse than ever before? No, it's not. To some extent, with ebbs and flows, we've always been like this. I demonstrated that to you. If I had more time, I could do the entire history of the United States. I could show you how this just ebbs and flows throughout the history of the U.S. It's not worse than ever before. We're not having a civil war right now. We don't need to have a civil war. We're not killing each other in the streets right now, yet, thank God. So what are we going to do? The question is, at this point in American history, what are we going to do? Because we have a choice. Because the people always have a choice. You're not just a little cog in the machine. You have free will. We're a church. God gave us free will. We have that free will. We can decide for ourselves what's going to happen in our country. We don't have to listen to Joe Biden. We don't have to listen to Donald Trump. We don't have to listen to Mitch McConnell or Nancy Pelosi or any of those blabbering idiots in Washington, D.C. who think they know how to run our lives. Because we can be like Levi Preston and we can decide for ourselves. So what are we going to do? So I think there are two possible paths here. Path number one is that there is a war. There's actually a civil war. That there's a revolution, whatever you want to call it. That is a possible path in our near future, in my opinion. And I hear this from a lot of people on the right, and I think it's highly irresponsible. I'm going to say it out loud here. People say to me, well, I think, Mark, we just need blood to run in the streets. We just need a revolution. And, we need to break this country between the left and the right. We're just going to have to sort it out. And by the way, people on the right have all the guns, so we're going to win anyway. How many people we have in this room that have actually seen combat? Raise your hand if you've been in a war. It's not that many in our society. I got one back there in the corner. We don't want to see that. If you want to know what war looks like, if you really want to see what war looks like, then watch online some of the actual video coming out of Ukraine right now. Because you want to see what war in the United States would look like, that's what it would look like. And dead babies in the streets, grandmas weeping over their kids dead in the streets. That's what war looks like. And when people say that to me, I just think, man, you don't have any idea. And I don't have any idea. I'm not a warrior. I didn't serve. God bless those of you who served. I didn't serve. My son was a Marine. He didn't face combat. But I don't wish that on any society. I certainly don't wish it on our society. It may come to that. I can't guarantee it. I don't control that. Duty is ours. Results belong to God. But I will do everything I can in my power to peacefully prevent that from happening. I won't run if it comes, but I'm not gonna foment that. But that's one option. People in Texas, we Texans think we're so great. We'll secede from the Union. How are we going to do against China? That's going to be a good one, huh? Texas versus China. Yeah, that doesn't work out so well. And so there's no realistic way to do this. I live in Texas. Everybody thinks Texas is a big red state. Austin? I live just outside of Austin. Nothing red about Austin. It's dark blue, right? Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. I mean, here, look at the big cities, right? You go out the countryside here, lots of conservative people, lots of red areas. That's a map of the entire country. But you go into the big cities and they're all blue. How do you divide that up? You have a war, a civil war, what do you like with that? We're going to get Philadelphia to California. Like, there's just no way to do it. So I don't see any practical way that we divide the nation. And so what do we do? Well, the question is, do we need to stay together? I think that's important, right? What's the through line? I said there was a through line, right? The through line is, do we live in a time when there's an existential threat, right? Is there an existential threat to the United States right now? Yeah. Actually, multiple. The Chinese, I think, are the greatest existential threat that the United States have ever faced. They're inside the United States, right? And they hate us, and they want to destroy us. They believe there's only one sun. They say that means only one empire in the world, and that's China. They want to destroy the United States. It's an existential threat. I would say Russia, maybe less so today because of what's going on in Ukraine, but Russia, an existential threat. They hate us. They want to destroy us. Don't like our way of life. A lot of other countries. I would say Islamofascism, potential existential threat to the United States of America. I would say the drug cartels on our southern border, potential existential threat to the United States. A lot of existential threats. So that means we got to stay together. We don't like each other. We're frustrated with each other. We're at each other's throats. So what's the alternative? That's it. It's a good thing there's not like a cross up there, because that's really the answer, right? The real answer is turn to God. That's the real answer. But politically, our answer is Convention of States. When I started thinking about all this stuff, and I came up with this idea of how to describe it and go through American history, the honest truth is I didn't think of Convention of States at the beginning of thinking my way through this. I just started looking at American history and trying to figure out where we came from and what we've been through and how did we make it through it and what was the ability, what was it in our structural DNA that allowed us to make it through it. And in the end, I came to federalism. The reason we can stay together is because we are federalists. Because we believe that the centralized government should only do a little bit of stuff and the rest of us should do all of it on our own, out in our own states. And so our choice now is revolution, civil war, destruction, falling to existential threats, or get back to federalism. And how do you get back to federalism? It just so happens we know how, because the founders told us how. The framers said in convention in 1787 on September 15th, we have to give the power to the people acting through the states to call a convention of states to propose amendments to restrain federal tyranny. Do we live under federal tyranny? Yeah. It's pretty obvious. And so what we do is we call a convention of states, we propose amendments, and we bring the power back to the states. One of the things I hear all the time is, well, it's such a right-wing thing. What's right-wing about that? I'm originally from California. I'm in exile in Texas right now, but I believe in bringing power back to California. I mean, it seems crazy. They're going to do crazy stuff with that power. They're going to continue to destroy their own state. God bless them. Let them do it. I don't want them destroying the whole country, but let them do what they want to do. Let Maryland or New York or whatever do what they're going to do. And even when I'm sitting with our team in Maryland and they know that their legislature is dominated by Democrats, or in Delaware, well, their job is to fight to take that legislature and make it more conservative. But it's not to leave the power in Washington, D.C. So the solution was given to us by the framers in 1787, as ratified in 1789. They knew this time would come, and they were geniuses for structure. They understood that if you had the right structure, then things would work out again. It's because they didn't believe that human beings were perfectible. That's kind of a leftist thing. They believed that human beings were sinners, that we were flawed, that we would would never be perfect, that we needed God, that we needed religion. They said our Constitution was inadequate for anybody but a moral and religious people. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah, it's true, absolutely. Yes, you can applaud for that. That's okay. So we've got to go back to the foundation. Number one, in my opinion, this is me as a person of faith, we've got to go back to God. If we ignore God in the equation, if we don't think about faith in the equation, then everything's just relative. Then we live in a time of moral relativity and humanism, and you know where that always leads? Always, 100% of the time, killing babies. I mean, it sounds really simplistic, but it's about as evil a thing as I can possibly think of. And without a belief in an almighty God who is just and righteous and good, then you end up killing children. You end up in child sacrifice and really horrible stuff. It's the worst thing I can think of, and it's an example of where we're at morally and ethically in society. So we need to go back to the Constitution. We need to go back to God, and the Convention of States gave us the ability to go back to the Constitution. That's why I'm doing what I do. I'll close with this, and I'm going to take however many questions you guys want to ask. I do this first because I believe in God. First. Because I think this country is special. Because I think we had God's favor on us. And that's why this country was formed. God gave us free will. I said that earlier. Without God, there's no such thing as free will. That's a philosophical truism. You can try and argue your way around it all you want. We're not just a bunch of meat bags and chemical responses. God put free will on us. And then he gave us the United States as a place where we can exercise that free will in a way greater than any time in human history. If you want to see self-governance in human history, you can go through the entire scope of human history. You have to go all the way back to the Old Testament to find a true self-governing society. Go back to the Judges period of the Old Testament, and God told the people, the Israelites, to choose judges from among themselves, right? That's the definition of self-governance. It's kind of weird that God said that about self-governance. He said, choose judges from among yourselves. Who would have been the best person to choose the judges? God would have been the best person to choose the judges, right? Instead, he said, the system of governance I want for you is to choose judges from among yourselves. And so that's what the people did. So here we are living in the modern era. We choose our representatives from among ourselves. That's the system that God ordained for us. That is the Hebrew system of governance. I think it's God's system of governance. So I do it because I believe in God. I do it, number two, because I love my family. Because I got a wife that I've been married to for 28 years. I got parents who are still alive. My parents are in their 80s. I got a son who is a Marine and just graduated from law school. And by the way, he spends every day of his life now suing the Biden administration for everything. My daughter graduated from Hillsdale College. She's a political warrior for a living. She now works for our organization. She's done education reform for years. So I do it for them. I do it for my kids because I got to be able to look at my kids and I got to be able to say, I'm really sorry about what we're leaving you with, but I've done everything I can do. And now the fight is yours. What I can't say, I can't look at my kids and say, I know it's really bad. I know my generation really screwed it up. Sorry about that. It's been pretty good for me. I'm not going to do that for my kids. Like when I die, I don't ever want to feel like as I'm going home to the Lord, I don't think I wish I would have fought harder. I wish I would have done more. Right? So I do it for my kids. I look at my parents in their 80s, retired, towards the end of their lives, and I look at them and I think, they gave me what I have. Right? And they were willing to do what was right, and to struggle and to save and be righteous, moral people, and they gave me what I have, so I owe it to them too. And I owe that debt all the way back to the founders, to Levi Preston. Because when Levi Preston went out on the field of battle that day, it wasn't just for him, it was for everybody that would come out. It's been a lot of generations since. A lot of men and women have given all, right? Think of all the battles, all the wars, everything that people have given up so that you and I can be here today in a church in Pennsylvania on a weeknight talking about how to save the country. We owe it all to those folks. And we have an obligation to do everything we can to pay it forward. Very specifically, I'm going to put something on it, which is I need you to pay it forward. I need you to play your part. I'm playing my part. I'll keep playing my part. Literally, I'll stop when the dirt hits the box above my head and I'm 6 feet under. That's when I'll stop playing my part. The question you got to ask yourself is, what's your part? What are you willing to do? We're all busy. You guys are all way too busy. I know how it is. Nobody's sitting around with time on their hands, eating bonbons and watching TV. We live in a busy world. You got a job, you got kids, you got church, you got school, you got other obligations. You're taking care of parents, you're taking care of family members. You're busy. I know that. What are you going to give? The founders pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. You guys have heard that phrase, right? We can all repeat it. If I just said the first part, lives, you guys could say fortunes and sacred honor, right? Really interestingly, and the part that's rarely said that you don't hear is who they pledge that to, what they pledge that to. You know, did they pledge that to the American flag? Nope. To Washington? No. To the Continental Army? No. To the new country, the nation? No. They didn't pledge their lives and fortunes and sacred honor to any of that stuff. They pledged lives, fortunes, and sacred honor to each other. That's weird. It's a little bit odd under the circumstances. Why did they do that? Why to each other? See, because they understood what they were facing. They were going to war. We're in a war. Make no mistake, it may not be a shooting war yet, but we're in a war. We're in a war, and we're going to decide how this war comes out. Is going to decide what the future of our nation is. Does America slide into the ash heap of history like every other republic before, like every other country before, or does America prevail against all odds? We're going to decide by the way that we fight this war. And we're going to decide by whether you and I stand together. Ben Franklin famously said that we must stand together. Or surely we shall hang separately, right? So you're going to get attacked. You're going to get attacked. You're going to get attacked because you're going to wear the wrong shirt. You're going to say the wrong thing. You're going to do something politically incorrect. You're going to get called out for supporting Convention of States, this white supremacist Nazi organization, right? And you're going to get shamed, maybe in church, maybe in your kid's school. You might lose your job. And when you do, who are you going to turn to? And the question is, are we here for each other? This is a really important question. I say this with all seriousness. Every night when I go to sleep, before I go to sleep, I pledge my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. Not to the country, not to the flag, not to the military, to you. Because I have an opportunity to meet you, to hang out with you, to look in your eyes and to know who you are, to know how much you love the country. It's an extraordinary opportunity, and it fills my heart with the desire and the urge and the need to pledge my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor to you. And I mean that in a very specific way. I can say that sort of generally, broadly, it sounds really nice, but I mean if you get attacked, call us, reach out to us. People try to shame you if they're slamming you online or whatever, and you need help, let us know, and we'll try to help. Because you're my brothers and sisters in arms. Because if we're going to save this country, we're going to do it together. You know, you heard earlier that there's a blue sign-up sheet, and that'll be passed around. It's back there in the back of the room. That's the place where you put your name down and you pledge your life and fortune and your sacred honor, and you say, I'm going to do something. I don't know what it is. I don't know how much time I can give. I don't know how much energy I can give, but I'm going to do something. So I ask you, my heartfelt plea to you today before you leave is to sign up to do something, and then when you go to sleep tonight, just like I do, think of me in my hotel room over there at the Philly airport, if I can figure out how to get back there, I will pledge my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor to you guys. So God bless you guys. Thanks for having me. Did you want to say something like right? Yeah, well, you're standing up here, you got notes, you look like you're ready to go.
With you, man, I'll go anywhere. I'll go in any ditch, any place.
I like it. So, do you guys have any questions? I'm happy to answer any question. And this is super important, by the way. No questions are off limits. Like there's nothing scripted. We'll go here and then I'll go back to you.
I'll try and speak up. So, thank you for coming. Great speech. One of my biggest fears, you've got 3 items listed on this Convention of States. If you open up Pandora's box, it seems like anything could be put on the table there. And my biggest fear is when you get to within 2 states, I forget what the number is.
34, yeah.
34. So when you get to 32, the Democrats will say, we're going to lose this. So we're going to quickly pass 2 states, in blue states, and then we're going to say, we beat down those conservatives, and we're gonna get our agenda through, and the news media is gonna say the Democrats are gonna save us through the convention of states, and the whole agenda will get shifted. I mean, you open up that box, anything's on the table to get passed. So how do you stop and just stick to those three topics?
Okay, so I'm going to repeat the question so we've got it on mic. The question is really, I'll simplify it for you. If I don't restate it correctly, then please interrupt me. But basically what you're speaking to is something called the runaway convention idea. You might have heard that term before. And it's the idea that once we convene convention, then the Democrats or the left will take it over and they'll do something completely different. It won't be those three things. And so there's a couple ways to answer. First of all, I just want to correct the process a little bit. Okay, so you said we get to 32 states, the last 2 states will be Democrats. And well, the reality is that every state will be invited no matter what.
Sure.
So you don't need Democratic states to be the last 2 states. That doesn't really make a difference.
That's how they declare victory. They say, we pass them, and then we say, we wanted this all along.
Well, they might, and I would say, God bless you, thanks for joining us and making it easy. That's what I would say. Okay. So the question is, I'm going to start with a question, I'm going to answer the question. The question is rhetorically, do you trust the framers of the Constitution? That's a rhetorical question. I'm asking you to answer the question. My answer is, yeah, absolutely 100%. Everything that they built into the structure of our system of governance has worked, except for where we've broken the structure. And we have broken the structure in a bunch of places. That's what we're trying to fix. The question about the runaway convention is, can you get into convention and then do anything you want? And I'm going to start at the end, not at the beginning. The end is, let's presume you can't. You used the term Pandora's box. Let's presume the Pandora's box is busted open. Let's presume California comes to convention, which they will. And let's presume I've seen the bus, they've got a psychedelic painted bus with hookah pipes in it. They're going to drive across the country. They'll get there and they'll be all stoned out. And first thing they're going to say is, let's get rid of the Second Amendment. Right? I mean, we're in this debate right now. So you'd be surprised that some liberal state would propose getting rid of the Second Amendment? No, of course not. So these things are going to happen. They're going to make these propositions. Let's presume there's no procedure in place that prevents that. There's a bunch. I'll talk about this. But let's presume there's nothing. Let's presume that gets proposed. 26 states have to say yes to get it out of convention, a majority, right? So let's say 26 states say that we're going to repeal the Second Amendment, and they send that out to the states. The first thing, important thing to remember about the convention itself is it is for making suggestions. You could actually call it a suggestion meeting instead of a convention. Sounds less serious, because the reality is that's all it is. The only thing a convention has the power to do is make a suggestion. So let's say they've now made this suggestion, we're going to repeal the Second Amendment. Bad suggestion, but let's assume they make it. Now you got to do math. Okay, now I'm a lawyer and I'm from California, went to public school, my math's not good. But I can do up to 50, right? I make it at 50. It takes 38 states, 3/4 of states, to ratify anything that comes out of convention, right? That's what it says in the Constitution. Can't change the ratification method without an amendment changing the ratification method. So it takes 38 states to ratify the repeal of the Second Amendment. Today, in the United States of America, there are 26 states that have constitutional carry, right? So that means that you don't even need a permit to carry a weapon in that state. 26 states, right? And it takes only 13 states to not pass an amendment. It takes 38 states to ratify, 13 states say no. They, by the way, say no by not doing anything. They just don't take it out. And so it takes only 13 states to stop it. There are, as I said, 26 states with constitutional carry, 24 states where you can carry your handgun in the state legislature. I know that. I do it in most of those state legislatures. 14 states where you can actually carry a long gun slung over your shoulder, loaded with a round in the chamber, and sit in the gallery and watch the proceedings. Those are well-behaved legislatures, by the way. I'm just saying. I'm not saying it's a good idea. I'm just saying they're well-behaved. So think about that. Could you get 38 states to ratify the repeal of the Second Amendment? Of course not. It's impossible, right? And so here's a challenge I'll throw out to you. I do this all the time. I give out my personal email address. It's mmeckler@cosaction.com, and I encourage people, if you're worried about that, I understand why you would be, then just tell me what you're worried about amendment-wise, not in the legalese, but just generally, and give me the list of 38 states that will ratify it. I've made that offer on Hannity Show, Beck Show, Shapiro Show, Levin Show, and many others to millions of Americans. And believe it or not, even from the crazy people, I've never gotten an email. Because you can't do it, because the founders created a system where the bar was so high, it would be impossible to pass anything that's not just absolutely mainstream where the vast majority of Americans are in favor of it. Now I'm going to back up very briefly and cover some of the procedural protections. 34 states have to pass resolutions that say that exact same thing. By the way, that's a super majority of the convention. So why would those 34 states go outside those things? They're the ones who said, this is the only thing we want to talk about. And so you get in convention, and if you were to say, let's say you came from California, raised your hand, and took a big hit off your joint, and then said, I want to do away with the Second Amendment, man. Then somebody from Texas would say, that's non-germane and out of order. And the chair would slam the gavel down and say, out of order, we do not have authority to deal with those things. And so there are procedural protections built in all along the way. Got to get 26 states to agree, and ultimately 38 states to ratify. The idea of a runaway convention, and this is important, it comes from the radical left in America. And it comes because in the 1970s, we start to pursue a convention of states to overturn Roe versus Wade. The states are really unhappy about Roe versus Wade. The country's much more conservative back then. The vast majority of the country is really offended by Roe versus Wade back then. We ultimately get to 20 states, and the left starts to push back. Chief Justice Warren Burger, the Chief Justice who gave us Roe versus Wade, writes a letter to somebody on the conservative side, says, if you do this, you're going to lose your beloved Constitution in a runaway convention. So they invented to scare conservatives away from using the one process we have to shove the federal government back in the constitutional box. And today, the people who make that argument, there are some on the right who make that argument, but the majority of people who make that argument are the radical left. There's a press release signed by over 260 organizations. It's led by Common Cause and Center on Budget and Policy Priority, most Soros organizations, Planned Parenthood, La Razon, MoveOn.org, Communist Party of America, Socialist Party of America, all the public employee unions, all signed under this letter saying that this is the most dangerous thing that can happen in the United States of America. And then I'll close with this, which is every single nationally known conservative in America who's spoken on this subject is in favor of it. That doesn't mean they're all in favor. I can only know the ones who've spoken on it. There's not one nationally known figure. I will have people who say to me, yeah, well, my cousin Bob is a law professor at Poughkeepsie Community College, and he's against it, and he's a conservative. And there are people like that. But the reality is anybody with any stature, with peer-reviewed papers and stuff like that, and it drives me crazy sometimes, because sometimes people on the right will quote, like Professor David Super from Georgetown. He's a radical leftist. They'll quote Chief Justice Warren Burger, a leftist. They'll quote Lawrence Tribe, a leftist law professor from Harvard who's against this, because you can't find any nationally known conservatives who are against it because they understand that it's safe. Everything I just said and a lot more is on our website under the resources tab, so you can dig in. Over here.
Real quick.
Yes.
A lot of concerns online, you're speaking of it, a lot of conservative voices. They just want to know who's going to be in charge of it, who's going to be involved. Are we talking about an elitist group? Are we talking about, people we don't know about? Who's going to be making these choices? Oh, and how does Mastriano feel about informing?
So I can't speak to Mastriano. I've not spoken with him. What's that? Well, now we know how he knows about it. There we go. Corman is a supporter as well, so both those guys are in support. So there are questions, because just in case everybody didn't hear, it's like, who's going to be there? How do we know who's in charge? I just want to make sure I'm saying this right. And I get this all the time, like, we don't know what's going to happen. So here's the deal. The states are in charge. The state legislatures are who are in charge. So every state will choose their own delegation however they want to. And some people will tell me, I'm not sure I like that. Are you a Federalist or are you not a Federalist? Like, I love that. No, I'm not saying you. No, your state legislature decides. They could have you vote on it if they want to. It's up to your state legislature to decide who to send, how to choose delegates, all of that. And that is the constitutionally specified way. It says it's up to the state legislatures. And they did that because they knew that the state legislatures were as close to the people as they could get. And so they didn't believe, and this is really important, the founders were anti-democracy. You know that? They were anti-democrats. So it drives me crazy. People, we live in our democracies at stake. We don't live in a democracy. Founders hated democracy because democracy to them meant the mob. It meant mob rule. It meant there would be no minority rights. And so they entrusted governance to government closest to the people, and that's the state legislature. So your state legislature will choose your delegation. However they decide, some states are passing legislation saying how they will choose it. Some are not doing that in advance, but a bunch of states have. We've passed 19 states now. I would say probably half of them have some form of delegate choice act that they've then passed. And so they'll send their delegation, each state gets one vote. They can send 100 people, 5 people, 1 person. They're gonna get one vote because it's a convention of states. It's not a convention of delegates or a convention of population. You'll hear people say, oh my God, it's gonna be just like the Electoral College. No. And how do I know that? Because we've had over 40 conventions in American history, 11 before 1787, another 30 since 1787. Not Article 5 conventions, to be fair, but interstate conventions, they've always operated the same way. Every state, one vote. And we had one convention, which was a convention to try to avoid the Civil War. And they held a vote because some of the big states said it wasn't fair to have it one state, one vote. And so they held a vote to see if we could change it to proportional representation. They voted one state, one vote, and they decided not to do that. So the small states would walk out if they tried to do proportional, they would lose their quorum. There's no practical reason small states would participate in a convention where they didn't have equal representation. So it'll be the state legislatures empowering a state delegation, which they retain control over. They'll gather in convention, they'll pass their own rules in convention. A lot of people freak out on that. 70% of state legislatures use what are called Mason's rules. If you're not familiar with those, they're similar to Robert's Rules of Order. There are a couple different kinds of rule sets. They're going to do it that way because most of them will be state legislators. They're going to need a rule set they're familiar with. Likely in all the conventions in American history, as far as we can tell, about 85 to 90% of the delegates to state conventions are either sitting state legislators, county supervisors, town council members, people who are familiar with the process. And so that's how the process works. And then, again, important to remember, whatever comes out of a convention is just a suggestion. Ben, any question?
Yes. The topic here is the limit of power and jurisdiction of the federal government. I was wondering, most people are not aware of Roe v. Wade and how it was decided. I wonder if you could explain to people how they made the final decision to pass.
So, Roe versus Wade, it's obviously very topical right now. It is, as a lawyer, I can tell you, and this is, lawyers, I'm obviously a right-wing guy, lawyers on the left who are honest, and there are quite a few of them on there that will be honest about Roe versus Wade, is a terribly decided decision. Put aside the moral aspects of the decision, which are much worse than the technical aspects, but technically it's a terrible decision. So if you read the Constitution, we all think that we have a right to privacy, right? And so the question is, where is that in the Constitution? And the answer is, it's not there. There is no right to privacy in the Constitution. It doesn't say that in the Constitution. If we wanted, we could add it, we could have an amendment, but there's nowhere that says the words right to privacy in the Constitution. So there was an invented right to privacy put into the Constitution by the Supreme Court. And then when Roe versus Wade comes to the Supreme Court, they invent a right to an abortion, and they say it emanates from the penumbra surrounding the, now, I don't know what any of that means, and I'm a lawyer, right? It's an emanation from a penumbra. I'll let you guys go look that up. It's crazy legal language that actually doesn't mean anything. And so what they did is they just invented this stuff out of whole cloth. Did you want to answer that?
Wasn't the 14th Amendment that the person has the right to cross state lines?
So,
limit commerce.
Yeah, so we can get into commerce and all that stuff, but I want to get back into this aspect. I'm going to even go off of Roe versus Wade. I want to get back to limiting the jurisdiction, scope of jurisdiction of the federal government. Everybody knows what term limits is, right? Anybody think we need term limits? Yeah. Everybody, so what about term? What do you think about the idea of term limits on staffers and bureaucrats? So we have I want to look at that. It says term limits on Congress and federal officials. That's why it says it. Congress, if we just do it on Congress, that's actually dangerous. Because you would empower the bureaucrats, you would empower the staffers, right? And so that's why it says that. Then we've got imposing fiscal restraints on the federal government. So that's like a balanced budget amendment, tax caps, spending caps. Anybody think we need a balanced budget amendment? And last is limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. That sounds kind of the smokiest and the murkiest. I think it's the most important. So we talked briefly about enumerated powers, and that there were 17 initial powers given to the federal government. Now, that last time I did an official tally and wrote it all down in my notebook, I think it's around 17 million official powers, right? It's ridiculous. They have the power over absolutely everything. So that means telling the federal government what they can't do. The Commerce Clause has been broadly expanded to tell the federal government that they can do anything they want to do. It's ridiculous, it's absurd, it's not legal, it's unconstitutional. So we need to cut that back. We need to say, for example, no, the federal government may not be involved in education. What do you think about that? How about you can't be involved in our health care. You can't be involved in energy. These are things that are always intended for the people in the states. And I have a question. Here in Pennsylvania, I assume there's a Department of Health. Yeah? You guys got a Department of Education? Yeah? Department of Energy of some kind? I mean, you got them all here. And whether we like them or not, at least they're closer to us. At least we can do something with them that we can't do with the federal government. So that's what limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government is about. You got a question?
When you say that everything comes out of the Convention of the States would be a suggestion to whom? Who will do what with it?
Sure, it's a suggestion to the states, and then the states have to ratify those suggestions if they want them to be part of the Constitution.
But it would have to be 3/4 of the.
It's actually then, yeah, so it goes from 2/3 to 3/4. It takes 38 states to ratify anything that comes out of it.
And then if they are ratified, they become a.
Then they become, once you get to 38 states, then it becomes part of the Constitution. On average in American history, it takes about 18 months to ratify it. Yes, sir.
The term limits for Congress and federal officials, why are the state legislators afraid of that?
Yeah, this is one of the most interesting things to me, that state legislators own the term limits on. And when I first started doing this, I thought this is going to be easy. Because I figured what they would think is, well, great, if you throw those critters out of Congress, then I can go to Congress. And that was kind of my sales job when I first started. I'd go in and be like, hey, I really want you in Congress, not the folks that are there. And we need to rotate some of those guys out so seats open up. And they hate it. And there's two reasons they hate it. Okay, one I actually agree with, and one I disagree with. The one I agree with is, in a lot of cases, if you just rotate congressmen out of office, I talk about this, and not staffers and bureaucrats, in the states, they understand what happens. Because a lot of the states have term limits now. I come from California, they had term limits there. All it did was empower staffers and bureaucrats. So they've seen that. There's another reason too, and it's not unreasonable, which is it does take these folks some time to figure out how the legislature works. It takes some time to figure out how the committees work, how all the rules work, and so it'll take them a term, 2 terms, 3 terms to really get good at it. So I understand that as well. Those are good reasons. A bad reason is ego. They don't want to come home. They like it there. They like the attention they get in Congress. For most of these people, for a lot of them, it's the most money they've ever made. They've never had so many people tell them that they're handsome, good-looking, charming, and brilliant in their entire lives. You know, I love the saying, Congress is just Hollywood for ugly people. And so, I think there's a lot of that going on. It soothes their ego, and they feel good about being there. They feel really good about themselves. But so these are the reasons, though, that state legislators don't really like it. So the response to state legislators that I have to give them is, look, I'm not 100% in favor of term limits either. Like I said, if we get term limits without term limits on staffers and bureaucrats, I really worry about the problems that creates. And so I get why they're concerned about it, but 85% of the American public is in favor of term limits on Congress. We have an obligation to the American people as statesmen and women, as leaders, as warriors in this fight, to give the American people that debate. And if we want to debate against term limits when the convention comes, then we should do that. But those are the reasons that so many state legislators are uncomfortable. Yes, sir.
Mark, I just wanted to piggyback on the question that was asked in Meckler here about the elites and whatnot.
Yep.
He mentioned Mastriano and McCormick. Well, when Mastriano becomes our governor, the governor has no say in this process.
That's correct.
Right? McCormick is no longer in the running, so there's nothing to say about McCormick. This is all done at the General Assembly.
Correct.
Then if you take it a step further, the federal government only has one role: location and time. So the Biden administration, the Congress, the Senate have no other role there. So there are no safeguards. So here we have SR 152 and HR 109. There are even safeguards built into those resolutions that delegates want to go wild, right? And I think that's pretty much the case.
Yeah, it depends on the state, but some states like Pennsylvania are building in safeguards, and Indiana has it so it's a felony if the delegate does something that they're not authorized to do when they're in convention. But the process is very controlled. And what you're gonna hear is a lot of people, the people who are opposing it, we should be scared. I'll tell you, the main opponent here in the state is FOAC. It's one of the gun right organizations here in the state, and Kim Stolfer. I mean, I've been in meetings with Kim Stolfer. I've had this debate with Kim Stolfer. God bless the guy because he's a Marine, and I love me some Marines. But man, sometimes some of the Marines I know are pretty thick-headed and stubborn. I would say that's Kim, and he's wrong about this issue and doesn't know what he's talking about. If you want to see the debate, Kim Stolfer and I had a committee investigatory hearing. I believe that's online. You can watch that. It's one of the most embarrassing hearings in my life because I got stuck in, where was I? I can't even remember. I landed somewhere on the way. I missed my flight. I had to drive all night to Pennsylvania. My luggage didn't make it. I got to the legislature. You know, you guys, if you've seen me in these hearings, I'm wearing a suit and a tie. My wife cleans me up pretty well. And so normally that's what I'm wearing. I come into the legislature, I literally have not slept. I drove all night long. I went to the airport, they told me my bags would be there. They were not there. They were back, I think, where did I come from? Chicago? I don't know. It was 7.5 hours to drive to the legislature. And so I had to testify in the legislature in my Hell No Joe t-shirt. Thank God Rita Peters was there, our National Legislative Council, because she's a lawyer. She's dressed all beautiful and looked very impressive. And we made a little video. It's like, this is what not to wear in the legislature, and this is what you're supposed to wear in the legislature. Did you have a question here?
Yeah, you already approached a question I had.
Okay.
2/3 of it.
Yep.
That list up there, those three.
Yep.
Term limits, very clear.
Okay.
What you're trying to hit there. I was concerned about how you go about limiting power. I think you mentioned that.
Okay.
When you get on the fiscal constraints, it's easy to say balanced budget.
Yes.
But we got 30 trillion now. Okay? Any ideas or any feedback from economists as to how you even begin to unwind the mess with?
Yeah, so he's asking about fiscal restraints and what do you actually do? Because I agree with you. Like I say balanced budget amendment and it sounds wonderful. I don't even know what that means, right? I'm not an economist. I'm not even a biologist, so obviously I can't tell you what a woman is. How am I going to tell you what a balanced budget is? I'm sorry, I couldn't resist that. And so my answer to that is you'll get people in a room that actually understand this stuff and will debate it. But there is a plan. The best plan I've ever seen for reducing the federal deficit, and it's not 30 trillion, it's really 150 trillion unfunded liabilities. It's something several years ago that was proposed called the Mac Penny Plan, which is every year you cut 1 penny out of every dollar in the budget. And it's 1 penny. It's like, if you said that to your kid, your allowance is $1 and I'm going to give you 99 cents, they would laugh at you. Like, that's so stupid, Dad. What do you mean? I don't care about the penny. And the federal government went crazy, like, this is impossible. We couldn't possibly cut a penny. And the reason they can't is because the way that they budget is they say, well, next year we're going to raise everything 8%. And then if you raise it 7%, they scream that you've cut their budget, right? So I would say the best plan that I've seen for getting it under control, and it's a nice graduated control, is the Mac Penny Plan. Yes?
Greetings. First of all, I dragged myself here to ask you this question I posed to two of your advocates at various Mastriano events.
Okay.
Now, I am Jewish, so therefore the classic line is that you put Jews in your room, 2 of them, and you'll have 3 opinions.
That's my family.
So therefore...
And your family gets along well. We have 5 opinions we got Jews.
You get the idea.
Yeah.
So here is a follow-up to 2 of the prior questions having to do with runaway.
Yeah.
Number 1, if you're a lawyer, and if you're concerned about torpedoing that argument, then why not phrase the resolution ahead of time so that even if you get 38, okay, you're done. And if you only get 34, then you can use legalese, like if we can't get 38, then we flip to 34. What's wrong with that?
So in other words, why not have the amendments drafted in advance?
Right.
Because I'm a student of history. So I'm a student of history. And when we started this project, we studied, this has been in the Constitution since the very beginning. Why haven't we used it before? There have been over 400 applications in American history made for a convention of states. And we've never gotten to a convention of states. And so I wanted to figure out, why is that? And one of the reasons is when I talk to professors and historians, because a lot of times people have proposed a specific amendment. And I'll give you an example. If I were to say, we need a balanced budget amendment, and I were to lay out what I thought that balanced budget amendment is, like I said, I'm not smart enough to do that, but let's say I was, and I had a specific plan, and you cut taxes this much, and cut spending this much, and this is how you do it, people who are advocates of a balanced budget amendment, who love the idea of a balanced budget amendment, would hate my idea. Because some of them would be like, that's the wrong amendment. Well, it doesn't work that way. So hold on a second. You're misunderstanding the process. It doesn't work that way. Because once I pass it in one state, every other state has to be identical. Right? And so if I say, well, this is the balanced budget amendment, and I get 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 states to pass it, I can tell you, and I've talked to people all over the country, I'm going to get a whole bunch of people that love the idea of a balanced budget amendment, that would normally be with us, that would fight for that amendment, that don't like my balanced budget amendment, and I lose them. Professor Randy Barnett from the Georgetown Center for the Constitution, when I first came to, okay, so when I came to Randy with this idea, this is what he said to me on the telephone. I explained to him how this would work and that we were doing subject matter instead of specific amendments. And he said, and he's one of the smartest guys I know, this is the smartest thing I've ever heard in my life. And he said that because he had written a book before Mark Levin wrote Liberty Amendments that specified 10 amendments, and he said what he did was he made 10 kinds of enemies. Because people who believed in term limits thought his term limits were wrong. People who believed in a balanced budget thought his balanced budget was wrong. People who believed in limitations on federal power thought he did that incorrectly. So what that would mean is we would never make it to convention. And my goal as a political realist is to do the politics that it takes to get to convention and actually have these debates. So that's the reason it's structured that way. There's just a historical fact that we can't overcome if we actually want to get to convention. And history proves that that's true because here we are 243 years in and we are not at a convention.
We'll talk later. I echo what you're saying in this question. We would have never had the Constitutional Convention if the approach would have been like that. And when all the delegates went for the Constitutional Convention, there was tons of fighting, different ideas, people came with plans and will, but they didn't compromise, they went for something that they each thought they could sell
That's
to
correct.
their own state.
So it's political reality.
And by having that small representative government, I think you can go back and sell it to your state. Politicians doing what they're really supposed to do, and then Alexander Hamilton getting out and selling it.
That's correct. Good question over here.
So you get this all to go through, sort of as planned, and everything goes well. How do you foresee or what do you foresee the administration? Are they going to just disappear and walk away? Are they going to give up? Do you have any?
No, they're always going to fight us. So I'm going to rephrase the question a little bit, okay? Because I get this, I think this is the question, I get it all the time, which is, as conservatives, we look at what the government, the federal government does in regard to the Constitution, and we often say, well, they don't follow the Constitution now. So we're going to pass amendments. What makes us think they're going to follow the Constitution then? Right? First of all, the administrative state is never going to go away quietly. So that's important to know. We're always going to be in a fight for this. We have been for the entire history of the country, especially in the last 115 years. But when it comes to amendments, we have a long history of amending the Constitution, and they stick for about 100 years before we start to drift away. It's not because they're magic, there's no pixie dust. It's because you have 3/4 of the country agrees on something. Politicians are not the most stiff-spined people, to put it nicely. And so when you have 3/4 of the country that says, yeah, we're going to do that thing, most politicians say, oh, I've always been in favor of that thing. Right? And so what you get is you get them going along with this. You know, and all we have to do is look at some of the amendments. I mean, we give 18-year-olds the right to vote, we re-legalized alcohol, we give women the right to vote. We're not, all of those things are in place. Once 3/4 of the country said we're going to do it, the government generally goes along with it. And in regard to the Constitution more broadly, they actually do follow the Constitution. It's horrifying to say that as a conservative. I often carry a prop with me when I travel, which is what's called the Constitution of the United States of America. You can get it from the government publishing office. Ah, here it is. Does this look like any Constitution you've ever seen? It actually says it on the spine, Constitution of the United States of America. I'm not kidding around. And so it doesn't look like any constitution you've ever seen. It's over 3,000 pages. It weighs over 10 pounds. This is why, see, I can do my curls when I'm on the ground. And what it contains is every case ever issued by the United States Supreme Court telling you what your pocket constitution means. And so when we say they don't follow the Constitution, why we're wrong is what's in here, they generally follow. In here is Obergefell, the gay marriage decision, Roe versus Wade is in here, all the Commerce Clause decisions giving them all this power is in there, all the crazy stuff that we think our federal government was never empowered to do, it's all in here. And the way to fix this, the only way the founders gave it, is to use Article 5. Are we ready to close? Yeah, so yeah, this one, it's not as good for doing curls, but it's the real Constitution. You had a question back here?
A newbie, thanks to Ruth and a lot of her volunteers, I feel very confident. But I'm a Philadelphian, conservative, God-fearing, and I'm wondering, are there any blue cities that you can recommend I can look to for help, for getting the word out? I don't mind reinventing the wheel. I have a lot of plans and ideas, but I'm looking not to have to reinvent the entire automobile.
Yeah, I would say right now, the team that I would look to the most for that is Massachusetts. And I say that because the Massachusetts team passed the Convention of States resolution out of 2 separate committees this year. And so Steve can help you get plugged into that team and figure out how they did that. I will tell you the trick, quote unquote, is really, they worked really hard to build relationships with legislators. And so they had individual relationships with individual legislators that were champions for them. Some of those legislators had friends across the aisle, because contrary to what we see on TV, not every single Democrat in every single legislature is crazy leftist. And so some of them are actually patriots, and they'll do the right thing if they talk to the right people. So Steve can plug you in to the Massachusetts team, and they can help you with that. Anybody else before we close? Oh, yes, sir, and then I'll come over here to you.
So, in your background, like the whole Tea Party movement,
right?
Interesting, that was before the self-governance.
Yep.
So, what was the experience that you had gotten from that, kind of led the way to
So the question is, for those of you who don't know, I was one of the founders of the Tea Party movement, and in 2012 I walked away from it. And the reason I walked away is because we had elected the largest swing class in history since 1938, and they did nothing. And my belief was they were going to change everything. I actually thought, man, the American people spoke. Those were heady days. I went to Washington, D.C. I was sure everything was going to change, and then the swamp ate them. And so I was ready to get out of politics because I went broke in politics. You know, I was a lawyer. I made plenty of money, and then I got into politics, and I made no money. And so I'd spent all the money, and I was frustrated. And I just thought I would leave. And I had a friend come to me, Mike Ferris. Mike is the founder of the homeschool movement in this country, constitutional attorney, and he asked me if I was satisfied with what I had accomplished in politics. I said no. He said, you're approaching it wrong. You think we have a personnel problem, but we have a structure problem. And he just opened my eyes to it. He said, it doesn't matter how many good people you put into a bad structure. When you've broken the structure, if you keep putting good people into bad, you're going to get bad. And so he laid out this plan for a convention of states, and he was actually my co-founder of this organization. So that's how I came to be involved in convention of states, because I don't want to just work. I want to work at something that I believe can actually fix the country. So that's how I came to be here. All right, one more before we close.
Yep. Did you call on
Randy?
Could you give us an update of where this is at in Pennsylvania?
Sure. So I'll let the state team give you Pennsylvania, because they know the situation here better than I do. I'll tell you nationally, we passed 4 states in the last 4 months. We passed Nebraska, Wisconsin, South Carolina, and West Virginia. We're on the verge in North Carolina. We passed the House. All we need is the Senate. And frankly, I got one senator there that's just really pissing me off. That's all I need is one more senator. So we're close. Yeah, don't do that. You're attacking me. I heard that sound effect over there. I have those dreams sometimes at night. And so the key is just getting this one senator. That will take us to 20 states. We need to get to 34 states. I'll let somebody on the local team want to give the update where we are at locally.
SR 152, the Senate bill posted in 150 is, it's passed committee, it's going to the floor.
Why don't you come up here, because you'll come on up, sir.
It had passed the state government committee and went to the floor, and it sat on the floor for a while and didn't come up for a vote, so the Senate Pro Tem, Jake Corman, and we all in Pennsylvania know Jake Corman, right? What's his nickname? Jake. All right, so we're not sure what side of the fence he's actually on at most times, but at this point, we decided to pull it from the floor and take it to caucus. So caucus is all Republicans, that makes up caucus. So it's going to go to caucus, possibly because he's trying to make sure he has enough votes to pass on the floor. The last thing we want is SR 152 to fail. So it's in caucus. We hope we have enough votes. Our state director who is here are going to be, hopefully, state director, and our current state director, Steve Davies, are working very closely on this matter. There is a possibility it could leave caucus in June, which would be a good thing, and then it could go up for a vote. Then you have House resolution, because it's a General Assembly, you need the House and the Senate. House Resolution 109 is still in committee, and I think once we get SR 152 out of caucus, voted on the floor, then the pressure will be in the House, and I think we'll get some things going, is what I
Marciano is back in the caucus. He's back in the caucus.
SR 152 is in caucus, yes.
Yeah, just happened.
Yeah, and I would say, I got an update today. I was on the phone with Rick Santorum this morning, and he said that Corman brought it up in caucus yesterday. He talked to Corman. Corman did the rah-rah for COS in caucus, and that he got positive feedback, that nobody championed against it, that several people came up to him after caucus and said, we just need to get this done. And I want to say one thing about Corman, and I'm not going to defend Corman, but I'm going to talk to you about political reality. Sometimes people that we don't like, or that do things that we don't like, that we don't trust, do something else that's good. And the way that I've always worked with politicians is, politicians are not my friends. And all I care about is, tell me what you've done for me lately. That should be our relationship with our politicians, right? And so, I think there's plenty of good reason to be angry with, frustrated with Corman, but on this issue, he's going to champion this issue, and he is championing this issue. And I'm not telling you should be Jake Corman's fan club, but just know on this issue, he's going to try and push this through, and if he doesn't, then it's not going to happen, right? Because it's up to him what comes up in caucus. He can pressure the caucus to deal with certain things. And we're going to get that, and the reason we get that, again, is political reality, because Santorum and Corman have had a relationship for a lot of years. So when Rick calls Jake, Jake takes the call. And here's the other thing, Jake understands the political reality, and the political reality is you guys are powerful. And he knows that, and so he's going to cater to this because of you guys.
How many Democratic state senators do we know that are in favor of it?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any right now. I've been talking to Rick. You are, okay?
No, I don't know.
Okay, you know what? In talking to Rick, he told me he thinks there are probably 3 that we can get. And what he said is when he was a U.S. Senator, he worked with 3 state reps and senators who were Philly area folks. African-American guys that he worked closely with to help Philly and to do some economic development and other stuff in Philly. And these are guys that know him and that respect him, and also that it's not a negative political consequence for them to vote for it. So I think we'll get 2 or 3 Democrats to vote for it. Yeah, I like that. Ben says more than that. Guys, I'm going to close it out for the night. You guys have been really patient and tolerant. I'll stick around if you have personal questions for me. Thank you guys for your time.
Incredible, beyond belief. Appreciate you coming here and speaking and sharing your wisdom and also your guidance. And thank you all so very, very much for being here this evening, all the volunteers, all the people, everybody here that made this a very big success. God bless you all. We're going to have a closing prayer with Reverend Gay. If Reverend Gay would come up here and bless us. But you know what? I forgot something. So coming up. But I forgot, of course. Teresa, present for Mark that you made. Here we go. There's the first present for Mark. And Teresa made this.
Teresa is a fantastic volunteer.
Wonderful.
Oh,
Isn't that beautiful? She made that. Thank you, Teresa. Mark, we have one more present for you. David McCullough, 1776, illustrated edition book with all kinds of amazing things in there. Maps and the whole history and an illustrated version of everything. So also another from all of us.
Okay, prepare to leave. Father God, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for each family that has been represented here today. And we ask for your traveling mercies for each and every person that was here, whether they are here now or had to leave early. We give you praise, glory, and honor for the strategy that was placed in our Constitution in the beginning, that we can stand on it now to rectify things that are not right in our country. We give you praise, glory, and honor, Father. And we thank you for knitting us together. For your people who are called by your name, we are humbling ourselves. We are praising and praying to you to heal our land. Hear our prayers, Father God, and make